I'd like to call to order the California State Board of Optometry meeting. Thank you all for being here. We have, it looks like a pretty full house, so why don't we first start with the establishment of a quorum. Ms. Michelin, if you will take the roll call, please.
Ms. Brandvine.
Here.
Dr. Turetsky.
Here.
Ms. Michelin present. Dr. Chawla. Ms. Garcia.
Here.
Dr. Calgucci.
Here.
Dr. McIntyre.
Here.
Mr. Moradami.
Here.
Ms. Salazar-Sperber.
Here.
And Dr. Wong.
Here.
Quorum is established.
Thank you, Madam Secretary. I'd like to introduce our new executive officer, Shara Murphy. But first, thank our interim executive officer, John Brooks, for his service. We really appreciated you stepping in for the month or a little more to help us through and to make this transition, so thank you. So I'd like to put on record the press release on Ms. Murphy, if I could, please. California State Board of Optometry announces the appointment of Shara Perkins Murphy as its new executive officer effective October 31st, 2018, a date you will not forget. Ms. Murphy replaces former executive officer Jessica Seiferman. Ms. Murphy has over 10 years of experience dedicated to public policy, constituent services, and organizational development. Most recently, she worked as a confidential assistant in the executive office for the Department of Insurance, where she managed sensitive materials dealing with regulations, legislation, department policies, and complex financial issues. She also coordinated with more than 40 internal entities and stakeholders to advance the mission of the department. In her previous capacity as an executive director of a nonprofit, she managed all aspects of the operation, including programming budget, policy, hiring, managing staff, and volunteers. Here she gained leadership skills and knowledge working with a board to create policies that would advance the goals of the organization. One such goal was cultural competency. She worked with academics and training professionals to lead the development of trainings delivered by professional trainers to the board of directors. Ms. Murphy also has extensive experience working with elected officials. She worked in various capacities for Senator Patrick Johnson, Senator Michael Mikado, the California Democratic Party, Senator Mark DeSaulnier, Assembly Democratic Caucus, and Senator Carol Liu. Welcome to the board.
Thank you.
I'd now like you, if you could, to introduce the staff that's with you today.
We have some new faces, so I wanted to make sure that board and public and those interested parties are aware of the folks who were doing the work behind the scenes. First, I want to introduce Cherie Kimball, who is our acting interim assistant executive officer, who also leads our enforcement team and has been working hard for us for a long time. Next to Cherie, we have Ashra Kwasmi, who is our lead of licensing. And then also next to Ashra, we have Jessica Swan, who is our new administrative analyst.
Thank you. And welcome all again. We have several new faces and a consistent face, so thank you, Cherie, very much. And that will help with the legacy and the transition, so we appreciate that. So, public comments and items not on the agenda. We have one from the public stepping up.
Good morning, Kara Cortez on behalf of the California Optometric Association. I do have an item that has come to my attention related to Optometry, which I know this board has had many lengthy discussions about these online refraction companies and your concerns with their, consumer health implications. The FDA issued a letter to Optometry dated October 30th, 2017. Was not released to the public though until about mid-2018. This letter essentially ordered them to cease their marketing activities because they found them out of compliance with marketing a medical device, quote unquote. And so my request is if the board could look into this, I can share the letter from the FDA with you. And perhaps if the board would be willing to issue a letter of inquiry to the FDA to see what the status is regarding Optometry working to correct these violations and if there has been any work, because as you know, they are still marketing to consumers in California. So my request is if the board will look into this, I'm happy to share the letter with you and work with you further on this. Thank you.
Please send to our executive officer if you would.
Absolutely.
Thank you. Any other members from the public who wish to speak? All right, thank you. We'll go ahead and move to agenda item number 3, which we're going ahead and table to the next meeting. As some of you start to get up, you don't need to leave. That was the full board closed session. And now we'll move on to the president's report. So let's start with potential board meeting dates and locations, if we could, please, and then we'll move on to the committee schedule. So first with January 25th, the board had been considering Ontario and LA as locations, and we would like to discuss and reach a consensus on the location, suggesting potentially Los Angeles this time as from the rotation standpoint within the Inland Empire, Southern California area. But would like input from the board members as well. You have a handout from our new EO on this subject. Hoping everybody has one at their place setting. Okay. So any comments on LA versus Ontario?
Go ahead.
This is, we're trying to decide between the two.
Between the two.
My comment is Ontario is much preferred over Los Angeles. It was really prohibitive traffic-wise last time in Los Angeles. It was just a big mess when we were there. The actual location was fine, but getting to and from was terrible.
And a reminder to turn on your microphone when you speak. I was just given the eye. Thank you.
So I agree. I mean, I personally think Ontario is, so easy to get in and out of. It's less expensive as well. I mean, I agree. LA can be a challenge. So that would be my comment.
Mr. Morodomi?
When was the last time we were in Los Angeles? I agree with the board member comments about the accessibility, but in terms of kind of being in all parts of the state, I think we should consider that too.
The rotation's been, I believe, 2 years.
What about, what about Burbank? Like right outside of Burbank Airport? But I know you all, San Diego people have to drive, right? You have no other option. I agree with what you're saying, that we haven't been to LA before. I think having it at that state building was very difficult. Parking was really hard, and I would pick the better location that's closer to an airport. I mean, I don't care. I get your point. I don't know.
I like Ontario.
So do I.
Okay, any other comments before I announce our location? Dr. Kawaguchi, any input, or Dr. Wong? Dr. Kawaguchi, you're driving, give us please input.
Yeah, so I think for us, it's access, not just for us, but also for the public as well as consumers. So I think we do need to be mindful that we're moving around within the state to ensure that we have access to our meetings.
Dr. Wong? No comment? Another driver? Dr. Turetsky?
I will be excusing myself from that meeting because of a prior commitment, so I don't care where you have it.
Another comment is that how far really is Ontario from Los Angeles? It's maybe an hour drive. It's in the same general area. Yes, it's a different county. But having grown up in Southern California, to me, driving Los Angeles or Ontario was not that big of a difference.
Ms. Garcia?
I just, excuse me, I just go with the fact that I think we'll save more money just to go there because everything's just so closer. I mean, the airport's just right there. You don't have to pay to go to the airport.
Ms. Berber?
I think either one is fine. I think either one works.
Okay. So,
Madam Chair, I assume for the record that no members of the public have any comment on this decision, right?
why don't we invite members of the public, if you have a comment, to please step forward. Well, I was hearing I believe the majority was looking towards Ontario, with a couple asking us to be considerate of Los Angeles and the rotation there. If we were doing an LA location, something on the outskirts of what is perceived to be LA may be a good solution. However, the traffic is to be considered for those who are driving. So let's go back to Ontario, please. And his Woodland Hills was the only other location that we had used in the past. I think a long time ago, I remember going to Woodland Hills. No? Mhm.
It was Van Nuys.
Van Nuys, okay, that one won't
That was a
work well.
great building.
I have a question. Respect to Burbank, are there any state buildings in the Glendale area? Because Burbank and Glendale are very close. Just over the freeway is Glendale. Were there any state buildings?
That's a good question.
And there are nice hotels there in the city of Glendale as well. Glendale is just right over the freeway. No. Glendale is very close to Burbank.
That's Glen, yeah.
Yeah. Burbank is just on one side of the freeway, and Glendale is right across the freeway. It's very close too. And I don't know if there's a state building in Glendale. And if not, there's some hotels there, but.
Let's do this. I'd like to work with our EO to gather a little bit more information, and then we'll make our final decision. We'll take a look, Ms. Swan. Okay, thank you. So let's look at costs and travel next week, and if you can report back to me, say by Wednesday, Thursday, then we'll go ahead and post the date and the location. But we will be looking at the Ontario and, if we can, outskirts of Los Angeles versus downtown Los Angeles locations. Now, committees. Before we go there, there's other board meetings, but I wanted first to talk about a potential committee meeting before this meeting on the 25th. So I'm going to do one committee discussion out of order. While we are looking at committees 30 days prior, it's the holidays. No matter where we pick the 25th, we likely will have a committee meeting that may not be in the same area, may be here in Sacramento, and it may be sometime in early December, so just keep that in mind. And we'll discuss the RDO and the timing of that. So I didn't want to tie that to the day before the 24th and 5th. You will only be looking at the specific quarterly board meeting for those two locations. Thank you. So now let's look at the April board meeting, please. As I recall, we had a request to look at a date other than the 5th. How's the 12th of April with board members? Any objections from board members? As you scroll through. Yes. That is Good Friday, I believe. And we need to. All right, so what about, we looked at the end of March, potentially then? What is that date? The 5th was an issue with one of the board members that was reported into staff. Is the 5th still an issue?
Since we're bringing up issues, can we change the 25th in January? I mean, then I can go.
That's true.
But if everybody else is set on the 25th, it's okay.
let's come back to January. We'll do April, okay? And we'll come back to the January date. Because if we move the 5th to the 29th, but is the 5th no longer presents a challenge? The 5th is a,
You can just pick a date and I think that was.
the 5th and the 12th are both not good dates for you, so the March 29th, or we would need to look at
April 26th.
April 26th. And then that would impact more of us. Okay, that's not gonna be a good one.
March 29th.
March 29th.
March
March
29th.
29th? Okay, March 29th. And we're looking at San Diego.
So
Oh, no?
29th is- I mean, I can do it, it's just, I usually need to work at my office that period of time, it's very busy in my office. So, once we start pushing back into March, it just becomes kind of a coverage issue for me. But I can attend, I think. It's just not preferable.
So go back
Can we
to
do a day
April.
other than Friday?
We can just do it the 5th, let's do it the 5th then. I know for sure the 12th,
So the 5th is a potential for you, Dr. Wong?
that's correct. I think the 5th, everyone else stays the same.
Okay. We are thinking of swapping locations, moving the San Diego meeting to April
Yes.
and the Bay Area meeting to August, just from a cost and also from a, how hectic it can be in San Diego during the summer months, yes?
Have you looked at San Diego in April at the cost? Because I have. It's booked because there's so many conferences in San Diego. I'm just warning, I'm fine with it. I'm just saying you may want to check the cost because there's just a ton of conferences. And I know because we were trying to do a conference there and we
Okay.
couldn't get in.
The OC?
Let's see.
I mean, that's my only concern if you haven't looked. The prices will be higher. Sorry.
That's okay. No, what are the thoughts on Orange County since it's been a few years?
Yeah, Orange County's good.
Okay.
So we're going to do LA in January and then Orange County in April.
What about Riverside? We haven't been to Riverside.
Ontario.
Well, that's Ontario.
But Ontario was really just Riverside too.
Oh, that's true. Sorry. Well, I'm just trying to think, you know.
Okay, how about this? We settle
about
in on
Temecula?
dates and Temecula. And I will work with Ms. Swan and Ms. Murphy on I'm getting the gist of the location preferences. Let's look at some costs associated with them. And we'll take into consideration travel distances, if we could please. Now on August 16th, how's the Bay Area?
August 2nd or
16th, we needed to move August 2nd because it posed a conflict for board members.
The 16th, I can't say for sure, but my daughter will be leaving for college, so August is.
She can have her eyes checked prior to.
True, she could.
Come to the board
So I
meeting.
guess I just don't know, and the 16th might not be viable date
I'm
for
not
me.
here on the 16th.
Okay, so the 16th is out. And the week prior, I understood, was out.
I'm anticipating that my daughter will start kindergarten on the 7th. And so I'm just asking for that accommodation, but of course we'll do what the board needs to do.
Okay. And then the 23rd or so, what is that of August?
23rd.
Was the second something what, revisit then? Because I had it as to revisit, but maybe everyone's still now okay with the second.
Okay, is August 2nd back on the table? Any board member not now available to attend August 2nd? We're back on to August 2nd then. Oh, that helps. Okay. We're going off of communications that went into staff that where all these two dates were troublesome, so this is helpful to go back. So August 2nd stands. We are looking at the Bay Area and likely at the same location that the medical board had used that we used.
What about Oakland? We haven't been to Oakland in a while.
a while.
Isn't that Bay Area, right? Is that Bay Area?
Very much.
Yeah. So I'm just throwing that out there.
It's
We just-
also free. We can use the
Yeah,
LEU
use
Harris
that.
building. So,
Yeah. It's a nice state building.
A lovely town.
I'm just throwing it out there.
That's fine, we'll just do Bay, so we're gonna list it as Bay Area. We'll pick the exact location. And then lastly, October 25th, we were coming back here to Sacramento. Any comments on this date or location? Okay, so to recap, I believe I have January 25th.
Unless we can switch it.
That's right, let's discuss January
But-
25th.
I mean, I'm gone the 18th and the 25th, so that's gonna screw up the meeting. Don't even bother with it.
How about first?
I'm readily available on the 1st,
February, that
But-
would work, 'cause
but it is Groundhog's Day on
the
Saturday.
reason, I think the reason why that'll work, we're trying to have a DOC meeting. They'll give us a little more time.
Okay. Any other comments on the January meeting date moving to February 1st, was that?
Yes.
February 1st? Any board members have a conflict with February 1st? Going once? Twice? All right, now let me recap.
Oh, boy.
February 1,
Oh, boy, okay.
okay. February 1, and we're looking at either the LA-ish, Ontario-ish vicinity. April 5th stands, and we're looking at Orange County. August 2nd stands, and we're looking at the Bay Area. October 25th remains, and it will be here in Sacramento. Looks like we have dates locked in. We'll deliver locations back to you all with the first location for February 1st. Our team will delve into it just a little bit deeper to make sure that we're okay with obtaining what we need to obtain. All right, now let's talk about committees, if we could, please. First of all, on committees, I'd like to use this opportunity to onboard and help onboard our new executive officer. While the committees are listed on our website, I thought it would be helpful if I announced who the committee members were, and then if the representing chair, if the chair is here, and if not an alternate, could give a high-level overview without delving into business or anything that may look like we are making a decision on something, please. High-level overview of what that committee does, and then after that, we will talk about the cadence of committee meetings. So the Dispensing Optician Committee, Chair, Ms. Garcia, and we have 4 committee members, if you would like to announce who those are and the purpose of your committee.
Okay, well, the purpose of our committee is we're going through and suggesting, working on different aspects about the SLDs and the CLDs with licensing. We're going through the examination, and currently we're doing an occupational analysis on how relevant the exam is. The people who are on the board right now, and you gotta help me, I know it's Khan, and I apologize for not knowing their last names,
William Casella,
right,
and you have Kanchan Batu,
right?
and Anna Watts,
And then
and Adam Bentley. There you
yes.
go.
And they're on our board. The last time we met was in August, so I am concerned that we need to meet again. It was, we were working on, excuse me, the disciplinary guidelines so that we can then work with the board to merge them together or they work together.
So we'll discuss the timing of that meeting
Okay.
after we round robin
Okay.
introduction of the committees. But
Okay.
I'd like to visit that with
Great.
you ahead of our next board
Okay,
meeting.
great, thank you.
So Legislation and Regulation Committee, Ms. Michelin?
Pretty self-explanatory. We discuss the legislation pending, both sponsored legislation by the board and any legislation that pertains to the business of the board, as well as regulations, and make recommendations to the full board.
Thank you, and your committee members?
Uh,
Dr. Dr. Glenn Kawaguchi, Ms. Maria Salazar Sperber, and Dr. Lillian Wong. How's
good.
that?
Thank you.
And Practice and Education Committee, led by Dr. Madhu Chawla. I'll ask Dr. Lillian Wong if you'd like to give an overview. Well, Practice and Education.
We look at continuing education programs that are submitted to the board for approval, and then we just advise the board on matters regarding optometry.
And on that committee, besides Drs. Chawla and Wong, we have Ms. Martha Garcia, and Ruby is also on the RDO committee, so you'll start seeing that some of our members are on multiple committees. Dr. McIntyre and Mark Mordomi, representing the public. Next, we have Consumer Protection Committee, and this one is led by Dr. Kawaguchi? No, Mr. Mordomi. Thank you.
So this committee primarily oversees the enforcement program of the board. I believe under the bylaws, also licensing.
Oh, yeah.
We oversee the enforcement program, and I think also the examinations as well. But we haven't been involved too much with that. Currently on our agenda is re-examining the disciplinary guidelines. We're in the middle of a big project to revamp those. And on the committee with me are Dr. McIntyre, and I think Dr. Wong, aren't you on? No? Oh, Dr. Kawaguchi? Okay. And myself.
And Dr. Turetsky,
Oh, okay.
Dr. McIntyre.
Well,
Don't worry about me.
I think David is a recent addition, isn't he? No. Sorry.
That's okay.
Keep my foot in my mouth.
Public Relations and Outreach Committee, and Ms. Salazar Sperber.
So this committee is self-explanatory. Basically, responsible for consumer outreach and board outreach with regard to our strategic plan. And members of our committee are Dr. Chawla, Ms. Michelin, and Dr. Turetsky.
And I'd like to introduce also the work groups for Children's Vision, Dr. Kawaguchi, there you go, and Ms. Michelin. So Dr. Kawaguchi, would you like to give an overview?
So we have been working on uncovering and looking for potential solutions from, in the past it's been a legislative standpoint to improve care for children from a vision standpoint. We believe that there's opportunities, and the board has supported unanimously opportunities to try to not just only educate the public, but also ensure access to care for children. So we've been mainly working on legislation multiple times.
Multiple times, however, we do not give up on that which we believe in. So thank you. So now timing of committee meetings. We originally had discussed at the board meeting before the prior board meeting, potentially moving the RDO committee meeting to, instead of the day before, 30 days out. We're considering that. Could I have comments from the board, please, starting with Ms. Garcia, Chair?
I think that would work. That'll give us enough time to get information so that it comes into the board meeting for discussion. You get a chance to read what we talked about and our recommendations to you. I think we can do it.
Okay, to move, so we're looking at moving to approximately 30 days ahead of the board meeting cycle for dispensing optician
Yeah.
committee, advisory board. Sound good? Comments from the public on that one in particular? No? All right.
I just have a question
Sure.
from Ms. Garcia. Is it going to be an issue because usually those meetings are substantial and go most of the day? I know you're on other committees. So is that,
That'll work with me.
so you, okay.
I'll be fine.
Are you talking about the,
theirs.
just on a separate day than the committee meetings is what
Yes.
you're thinking? Okay, I thought you meant on the same day as the 1 month before committee meetings, but you're talking about a completely separate day.
Right, move doc to a completely separate day and it be at least 30 days prior to the board meeting where we can.
Right.
I mean, if it's 3
Okay.
weeks or 5 weeks.
Yes, because we do come up with, we'd like more input from the board instead of just reporting this is what we discussed. And if we want more of your recommendation and your input, it would give the board members enough time to look into as to what we're recommending.
And be a part of our packet,
Yes.
more a part of our packet. Okay. And the cadence for the other board meetings still around that 30-day out period? It appeared to be what the board was looking at, and we'll stay with that then. Okay, yes.
Are committees meeting prior to the next board meeting?
That's the next
Oh,
discussion
okay,
item.
sorry. Okay.
Okay, now, as far as, thank you for that intro and lead in, the next board meeting, seeing that it is now February 1st, do we want the dispensing opticians to meet prior to that, either at the end of before the end of this year, or now you have January, given that the date in January changed? Because that was under discussion whether we were going to try and work one in during the holidays / month of December. So we can look now at the first of the year.
Sure, the first of the year, the very beginning, maybe the first week in January, that'd give enough time.
You can check with your committee members perhaps and
Okay.
see what might work with their schedule, but it gives us ample time to fit in
Sure.
a meeting for you. And then whatever's needed in the board packet, please
Yes.
give us ample time because I know you have a lofty agenda.
Yes.
Okay.
Would it be possible to, I know that committee prep is a good deal of work for staff. If we can just consult as well, now that we are going to be doing DSC before the meetings the month before, just to talk with him about how we can stagger work in order to best accommodate
Yes.
the full committee day and then also the separate DOC committee day.
Yes.
Excellent.
All right. I think I've covered all
Well,
the topics under that.
So I just
yes?
want to be clear, because
Yes.
I'll make a comment.
Yes.
I don't think there's a reason for the Ledge Reg Committee to meet before February 1st because there's no, I mean, we have our bills that I think we've already approved to have shopped for authors. So I would take that off the table. So I just lightened your workload. Because there's not going to be anything for us to talk about.
So what we'll do then is have Ms. Murphy touch base with the committee chairs to determine when the next meeting will be for your committee, whether it's prior to the February meeting or shortly before the meeting after that.
So we're not going to set the dates that we had before?
We're going
Cor-
to now circle with the committee chairs to pick the dates. We first wanted to establish the board meeting dates, the doc date, because they're out of sync and missed their last meeting and have a lot on their plate. But now we need to circle back with each chair to see if you want to have a meeting before February 1st. If you do, we'll try to bundle them as much as possible. And if you don't, we'll get your dates from you, your respective, for the balance of 19.
We don't want to do that now, so we have one, we're all here and we have the one date that, at least going forward, I would not do it prior to February 1st meeting,
Okay?
but I would prefer to get it on the calendar now, because if I don't, I'd rather have the date. It was helpful to me to have that date on the calendar when I could block off that date and get all of my committee meetings done in one day.
So I think I hear what we want to do is to look at setting the date before the April 5th meeting, the
Correct.
August 2nd
Yeah.
meeting, and the October 25th meeting. And then and staff can have conversations with committee chairs about whether or not they're meeting before
Yeah,
February
'cause, like,
1st.
for
But
me,
today,
it's-
to set
yeah.
the April, August, and
Yeah,
October.
exactly. I think, I don't know what other people feel the same way, but it just seems like it's everyone's schedules, we're all here, we might as well knock it out now
Okay.
than send a bunch of emails.
No, that's fine.
Can you, were we a month out before I can't even remember. Was it a month before?
Typically about a month before the meeting. So the month before February 1st is right after the holidays. At least it's through that hectic month of December.
I suggest January 11th. Well, January 1st, I don't know if anyone else doesn't want to meet. I prefer not to. So January 11th. But I'm just looking at my kids' school calendar. I know that the week of Christmas and the week of New Year's is a holiday. So I don't know if people are in town or not. So the following Friday after that. Well, January 4th is the Friday of school breaks. So I'm suggesting January 11th.
Comments from members of the board?
And this is if your committee needs to meet.
If
If
your
you need to
committee
meet.
needs to meet.
All right, that's, okay.
Why don't we hold January 11th, if we could, please, for the committee meetings prior to the February 1st board meeting. Now, for the April 5th board meeting, what do we have? And when are any holidays or,
That would be March
6th is the Ash Wednesday.
5th, March 1st.
March 1st seems reasonable to me.
March 1st has been proposed. Any comments on March 1st? And I will get all the dates, and I'm going to turn it to the
I
public,
would-
too.
I don't know at the top of my head, but at least for Ledge Reg, I believe the 28th is the bill deadline. I haven't looked. So I would, at least for Ledge Reg, push it back, because then we can go through and see if there's any legislation pertaining to the board. I don't have the calendar in front of me. I don't know if you know. I can't remember.
No, I don't have this.
I think
legislative
it's
calendar in front of me.
the end of February. Is it? So is it March 1st?
Second
That Friday?
Friday of
So
the month.
that's
Right.
Oh, the last Friday is the 22nd.
So that would actually give us the,
Yeah, so I would push it, at least for Ledge Reg, to like the 8th, so at least we can, I mean, you're not gonna, for Ledge
March
Reg,
8th.
March 8th.
Okay. March 8th is on the table, ahead of the April 5th meeting. Any other comments from the board? All right, let's move now to the August 2nd meeting. Proposed date, let's see, August.
Oh,
So
alright, that
now
puts
you're
us
getting
right
to
at-
the 4th of July, get through the 4th of July, get out of the 4th of July, the 12th or the 19th?
Mhm.
No 19th, or
July 12th.
July 12th, board members?
Oh, hold on.
Or do we look at the end of June, the 28th?
I can do the 12th or the 28th.
Looking at calendars here, I'll give you all a minute. Okay. 12th, look good, not look good?
Would the
Dr.
28th?
Kawaguchi?
Either, I don't care.
I'm going to, with 2 days on the job, err on the side of trying to give staff a little more time in between committees and full board meeting. Is the 28th an option for folks?
June 28th? June 28th.
I will not be here, June 28th.
Okay, so we're at July 12th.
Is there an earlier date that we can all do?
An earlier date, perhaps in June?
Maybe. I'm just saying, I'm just throwing that
No,
out.
it's a good idea because it gets then ahead of the long holiday weekend / into summer.
Work can actually be
Break.
done before.
That might be a good idea.
The 21st?
I'm gone the 21st.
Okay.
What about the week before that?
14th is good.
June, that's June
Flag Day.
14th? Is that June 14th? How about June 14th
It's Flag Day.
on Flag Day?
I can do the 14th.
Okay, I'm looking to my right. Dr. McIntyre, Mr. Morodomi, Ms. Garcia, Dr. Wong, Dr. Kawaguchi, Ms. Michelin. So it's
June 14th.
June 14th it is. So ahead of the August 2nd meeting, we will have June 14th committee meetings. All right. Any comments from the public on any of our meeting dates? Nope? Okay, thank you. I think we've reached a consensus.
Along
Yes.
with,
I'm sorry, did you do the October?
Oh, October.
oh,
Oh,
thank you.
sorry, that's true. I'm already
I'm just
a
trying
year
to get
out.
out, just trying to get past, yes.
October 25th, ahead of October 25th, then we're on the Labor Day weekend.
No, Labor Day weekend's the
Labor Day
2nd.
weekend's the second.
I know, just stay away from it. People tend to
Extend that
go
as,
week plus, and then you've got,
So 13th through 20th?
okay? September 13th or 20th.
Either.
Which do you prefer?
13th. Does the
September
13th?
13th? Now, is school starting that day or anything that we're good with all that? Okay.
Yeah, I think so.
To my right, September 13th. 2 nods, 3 nods. Miss Berber, 4 nods? Oh, no.
Yeah, no, that should be fine.
Okay. That was the look of,
Look.
uh-oh.
That will be there.
Dr. Wong,
Sounds good.
Dr. Kawaguchi, and Ms. Michelin.
That's fine.
All right, now I think I have 1, 2, 3, 4. 4 board meetings, 4 committee meetings. Are you okay? We're good. You got it all. Okay. Now let me just double check on here. Okay, so it looks like I covered all the notes that came over from our EO and emails that have come in. Moving on. Let's go to agenda item 5 if we can, approval of board meeting minutes.
Okay, so before you have 2 sets of minutes. You have the minutes from the August, so we'll take the first one, August 3rd, 2018.
I
Are there
have
any
a small,
comments?
small correction on those. Page 4. I'm reading the top where we're approval of the April 20th minutes. It says the board voted 8-0 with 1 abstention, but it shows on the by the names that there was 1 no, and it should be an abstention. Dr. Chawla was abstaining.
Okay, so noted. Any other comments?
I'm sorry, I'm scrolling through the minutes. I reviewed them before the meeting, but I recall on one of the items, and I can find it either on this meeting or the second meeting, there's a reference that the board approved certain language. Oh, I think this is,
Do you have which meeting of the two?
I'm checking, yes,
Okay.
it's item, I'm sorry here,
Do you
August
remember
3rd?
what certain?
I'm looking at August 3rd. Are we not there yet? Oh, we are there.
Yes.
August 3rd, on the legislative report, Ledge Reg Committee.
We had the
Here we go.
two-person work group.
Yes, previously approved language regarding mobile services. Is there, can we have a reference as to what language that was, or?
It's in the previous board minutes.
Okay,
So we approved that at the prior meeting. I asked that question as well when I got the minutes. And they
okay,
said it was in the previous, it's noted in the previous, you'd have to reference, I mean, we could add that, please reference the
yeah, something
board.
like that,
I forget
right,
what board meeting it was.
right. I mean, if you want a reference to the prior board meeting or something like that, so my comment is specific to that, and in general, if we kind of refer to something else that the minutes reflect what we're referring to.
Mhm.
A little bit broader reference to help the reader.
Yes.
Well, I think
Broader or more specific?
more
Well,
specific.
it's
More-
specific on that, but broad to which board meeting, at what time. Now you get specific and go ahead and reference exactly what was discussed.
I mean, when I've asked, part of it is that's why they put the webcast in there, so they can click on and hear the full discussion, and they can see what we were talking about. So
Yeah.
that's the other, I mean, they do a really good job of linking it back to the webcast.
I get that, and I think that's great. I'm trying to both ease work on staff, but also kind of not require us to go to the webcast if we really don't have to. So if it's,
I mean, that is a lot on, because now you're asking the staff to go back and read through previous minutes to find that reference, where I guess if you're really interested, you know,
sure,
you can, and you're a member of the public,
Yeah.
I think we make it pretty easy to click on a link and it takes you right to the
okay,
webcast. I mean, that's just my opinion. I asked the same question.
okay,
So I think we have to decide, you know, what's more important and how many people are actually, to ask staff to have to do all that research and relink it to past board minutes.
right,
So
right.
just to be clear, if I click on this, it will take me to our motion, but will it take me to as well the discussion of what prompted that, which I think is what Mr. Moridomi's alluding to.
Yeah, I guess to kind of jump ahead a little bit in response to Rachel's comment, which I appreciate. For the future, maybe as staff is compiling minutes and something like this happens, if as they're listening to the discussion, if we say, oh, if we're clearly referring to language we approved at the prior meeting, to note that in the minutes. I don't expect
Yeah.
you to go back and look at the webcast and figure that out, kind of going backwards. But to the extent that's possible and doesn't require much resources, especially things when we're talking about language, right? It would be helpful if we're referring to something to note something in the written minutes, what we're referring to. Whatever's easy for you.
So for these minutes, would it be a compromise to say based on previously approved language at the, whatever the date of the board meeting was?
Oh, yeah,
And
that's
then it-
fine.
So I think you could vote on this with that edit, and then going forward, I think what you're saying is if there's something that you're referring to that happened previously, it's a little bit more detailed.
Well, if we're referring to language or something like that, it's helpful to know what language we're talking about.
Okay, any other comments?
Yeah, page
Okay.
5, bottom vote, the numbers are also off. So it says,
8-0 with one abstention.
yeah, it says 8-0 with an abstention, but on the
Mr.
table it's
Moradami
not.
should be abstained. That's when he stepped out. I think you took a phone call.
No, it's
Yeah.
still off number. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9.
Yeah.
There's not 9 yeses,
And one
1
abstention.
absence.
No, he wasn't absent though.
So that's why the 8-0 doesn't match with the table.
Right? He would be listed as abstention, correct? 'Cause
Even
he-
taking him out, there are,
No, I know that. I'm clarifying because he's listed as absent. He was at the meeting. He wasn't in the room when we took the vote. Remember, you left to take a
Okay.
call. So is he marked absent or abstention?
I think that would be an absent for that vote. He's
Okay.
out of the room, as opposed to affirmatively, I'm abstaining from this
Okay.
vote.
Okay.
But
Right.
it doesn't resolve the
Yeah,
the
so
numbers.
staff needs to fix the numbers.
And there's an option of just, after going through this and getting comments, tabling the actual approval until the next meeting. Or you could take a vote with the edits and subject to the fix on the numbers for this one.
Any other comments? And I think, if I can make a comment, I think with all the changes, I don't think these minutes got sent to the full board prior to the board meeting. So I would ask in the future, I know I look at them, but then it needs to go to the full board prior so that some of these things can, I mean, I go through it, but I'm busy too, so to have other board members look at it. So that way we can have this resolved before we come to the board meeting.
I'll move subject to the edits.
Okay, is there a second?
seconded by Dr. McIntyre. Okay, go ahead and call for a vote.
Hold on.
Diane?
Okay. Dr. Turetsky.
Aye.
Ms. Michelin, aye. Dr. Shaw is absent. Ms. Garcia.
Aye.
Dr. Calgucci.
Aye.
Dr. McIntyre. Mr. Moradami.
Aye.
Ms. Salazar Sperber.
Aye.
Dr. Wong.
Aye.
Ms. Brandbein.
Aye.
Motion carries. So then you also have before you the board minutes from October 5th, 2018. Are there any comments? Oh, there's a typo in the 8. There's a space that needs to be taken out.
Little cleanup things.
There's no comments. Is there a motion?
Motion to accept the minutes.
Do I have a second?
I'll second it.
All right, let's call for a roll call vote.
Okay, Dr. Turetsky.
Aye.
Ms. Michelin, aye. Dr. Chal is absent. Ms. Garcia.
Aye.
Dr. Calgucci.
Aye.
Dr. McIntyre.
I'll abstain.
Mr. Moradami.
Aye.
Ms. Salazar Sperber.
Aye.
Dr. Wong.
Aye.
Ms. Brandbein.
Aye.
Motion carries.
All right, so for clarity on the minutes, though, we'd like the minutes as soon as possible after the meeting while it's still fresh in our minds, and most importantly, Ms. Michelin's mind, to get over to her for review. Then it'll go out to the board for their review and any comments to go back into staff. Thank you. Would appreciate it. All right, let's move on. It's an hour, so we'll take another item here. To the executive officer's report, I'd like to invite John Brooks, former interim EO, to provide the report out, please. And then we'll invite, is Patrick here? Patrick, there he is, behind. Then we'll invite Patrick to come up from DCA after Mr. Brooks. And just so you know, we'll be moving agenda item number 9 so that you can take care of both agenda items. We'll move it out of order, but we'll start with Mr. Brooks.
Good morning, thank you very much. So hopefully you've all had the opportunity to go over agenda item 6, the executive officer's report. I'll skip to item B, which is personnel. So we have successfully promoted Jessica Swan to the administrative assistant, or administrative analyst rather. And we also have 2 conditional offers out to fill 2 additional vacancies, which leaves us with 3 vacancies that we're looking to fill, one being the assistant executive officer, one being the staff services analyst that focuses on legislative issues, and also a RDO MST limited term to backfill Ms. Swan. We're currently reviewing the applications for the staff services analyst and also the assistant executive officer position, and we're actually scheduling interviews for the assistant executive officer as early as next week. A couple of edits, changes that happened after this was drafted. The RDO management services technician posting will be closing on November 9th. Okay. And of course, Ms. Murphy started on 10/31. Any questions on personnel before we move on? Okay. There's also the enforcement program information drafted by Cherie Kimball with the associated graphs. Also, we have information in regards to the examination of licensing programs that was prepared by ARSHA, and those graphs and information as well. There are a couple of updates that I wanted to provide as far as licensing for issues that came up at the last board meeting. One being the RDO fingerprint issue. So there were a total of 2,300 licensees that the board did not have electronic fingerprint information on. So working closely with DCA's OIS team, a patch was installed this past week where about half of those fingerprint issues have now been resolved. So we're roughly at about 1,100, 1,200 that are still outstanding. Of those, about 670 of those, staff can go in and manually fix so that we are getting the proper information. So we're looking at approximately 500 people that are 500 licensees that we're likely going to have to ask to get reprinted. So staff will be working on fixing the 670 as quickly as possible, and then we'll also be looking to draft a letter to those 500 or so licensees that will need to get re-life scanned as soon as possible. Yes, sir.
So, of those 500 folks, when something like this occurs, is there a time frame? They'll get a letter saying we need a new life scan from you, and they say, and they don't do it for 3 months, 4 months, 5 months. At what point is their license suspended, or what action would be taken, considering they've done this, and it's more of a bureaucratic snafu than anything else?
Correct. So, well, in some cases, some of the licensees' licenses have been, are now currently delinquent. So this is impacting their active license situation right now. So in the letter, should be indicating, if you do not get this fixed as quickly as possible, your license is at risk. Because we cannot renew their license unless we have their electronic clearance from DOJ FBI.
Yeah, what is the cost associated with the live scan?
It varies from, because they're all independent operators. I know when I did my live scan last month for this position, it was $27. But depending on where you go, it can be anywhere up to $50, $75. So we want to encourage licensees to shop around.
I have a question. You mentioned there might be 500 that need to, not to put so much pressure on, I really am grateful for everything you've done.
Mm-hmm.
Do you have an estimated time when they'll get that letter just to notify them so they can
I do not. I would refer you to Ms. Murphy
Okay.
on that.
We became aware of the issue. I did at least 2 days ago. We have already begun drafting that letter with staff, talking about the language that would include. Is our intention to have a draft ready at the beginning of the next week, and then marshal resources from DCA possibly in order to get that letter out before, I think reasonably we would say the beginning of the next week.
And then, so
Go
then I
ahead.
have a further question. Or if any of these are in large corporations, is there a way to get a hold of the large RDOs and notify them? You've got these people, these licensees that need to have their fingerprint. It'd probably be a quick way to notify them because they probably have quick access to get to those.
We had discussed making sure within the language, we suggested to licensees that they bring this to the attention of their employer and they're registered, and that this is in fact an administrative issue. It is not due to their delinquency in any sort, and hoping that that might ameliorate any sorts of employment issues for them. We had not discussed, though, doing some sort of communication to the large entities, and that as much as feasible, we can look into that. I think that makes a lot of sense.
It would, because they can access all of their employees and say, you need to get this done. And they can get it much quicker to them.
So a question, you did say that this has caused some delinquent licensing.
Correct.
And when the public walks in and sees that their license is delinquent, do we have anything for the licensee that could advise at least that the renewal is in process, whatever we need to do here?
Right. So for the vast majority of the licensees that are currently showing delinquent in this situation, they have paid their fees. So it's just a matter of getting the fingerprint
Right.
clearance. And some of the people that are showing delinquent fall into the category of these are the people that we can go in manually and fix, which would renew their license.
Okay.
So, but other than that, there's not much that we can tell consumers that are calling in other than that their license is delinquent.
Yeah.
Staff
I just really want not to put pressure on anyone.
Mhm.
And it sounds like it is, because I know it's a lot of work you're going through, and I highly, once again, appreciate it, okay? But some of these people, they're not gonna be able to perform at all. They won't be able to do anything what their licensing allows them to do, fitting and adjusting spectacles. They're not gonna be able to do it. Their hands are tied because they do respect this, highly respect it. And they're being asked, you cannot fit any more spectacles, you can't do much. So
That's why we were working to remedy this as quickly as we can.
Our first priority is that this weekend we have staff coming in to do those manual fixes.
okay.
And so then, of course, the same staff we're looking to on Monday begin the processing of drafting that letter, which we have begun discussing how that will work. And then we'll also look in, we have a limitation in our database. And I have a limited understanding of how this works, but had a conversation with Jessica yesterday. And so there might be some issue in our ability to pull the data in order to send to corporations. And there will be a bit of maneuvering and, again, marshaling some resources possibly from DCA, OIS, in order to pull the mail merge listing and such in order to do to actual applicants. So we are addressing this weekend what we can do and fix for them, and then we'll immediately pivot on Monday to how we can address those who will need to take their own action and how we can possibly give them some ammunition in that fight to continue fitting, because this is not a delinquency of their doing.
Right, that would be great.
Perhaps a letter to the larger
Yes.
employers stating that what our intentions are to
Yes.
navigate this process might be helpful.
It would be.
And at the same time, to please encourage their population to move quickly on getting a secondary live scan.
Yes.
Okay, I have two questions / points. So, One is related to cost recovery. Have we made a decision on for those remaining that we cannot manually approve that are going to have to re-live scan? Have we made a decision on who's going to be responsible for the costs incurred? And then the second question is going to be related to for those that have done their part to submit their renewal or application appropriately, but they're currently delinquent because of administrative issues that are existing, is there a possibility for the board to offer some kind of special status for a reasonable amount of time while we are processing through and allowing them to have a reasonable amount of time to take care of things to recover the fingerprint issue? So is that a possibility?
So first, to answer your first
Can you
question.
identify yourself?
Hi, I'm Jessica. I'm the administrative analyst. I am also straddling the RDO coordinator position while they're backfilling my position. So the list of 500 individuals are individuals who were never fingerprinted. These are not individuals that need to be re-fingerprinted. These are individuals who are not being tracked by the Department of Justice. That is why they need to be fingerprinted. So that was, I want to clarify that.
Thank you.
So these individuals, generally the population are individuals who were licensed before 1990. And that was prior to medical board having a system in place that you entered the data into like a applicant tracking system. So when they changed to an applicant tracking system, whoever wasn't in the applicant tracking system maybe didn't get fingerprinted. So a lot of these individuals were licensed prior to 1990. So that's the population that we're addressing right now. And then a lot of them were licensed prior to 2012 as well, and that was when they medical board started to do another type of tracking. So that's the population that we're dealing with. Then to your second point.
Well, so let's stop there for a second. So is your suggestion then that the board should not be responsible, correct, for the cost that's going to be incurred? It should be the applicants, correct?
It's for
Or the
this
renewal.
500 population of people that are getting their fingerprints, they're being fingerprinted for the first time.
Right.
It is a part of their requirements to be licensed per the regulations.
Okay, thank you.
So,
Excellent.
so then the second part to your question is there a secondary status that they can be a part of? So the board does not go, we're not doing any enforcement against these individuals who are delinquent because of an insufficient fingerprint hold on their license. The majority of individuals that are impacted are going to be individuals in a situation where they're in businesses that have other licensees, and so in the regulations of the under the RDO program, a spectacle lens dispenser or contact lens dispenser can supervise up to 5 licensees at a time, and so it's not impactful necessarily. So if you base it on that, so the board is not directly going after those delinquent licensees at this time while we're handling this issue.
And also from a Breeze perspective, there is not another category we can put them in, and we can't make them active unless we have fingerprint clearance.
So I understand that, and that makes sense. I'm just wondering if you shouldn't have the official support of this board in the decisions that are being made from an administrative standpoint, so that there's clarity, at least in our minutes, of what decisions are being made and potentially also more definition on what timelines that we're going to be willing to wait for enforcement. Because at some point, there's going to be final delinquency. And so they won't be able to function under their license. So I'm not saying I disagree with what you're telling me. It makes sense. I'm just wondering if we shouldn't, as a board, be more formal in our support.
Because I guess my question is from a consumer protection standpoint, if they've never had their fingerprints run, we have no idea anything that could pop up that could put their license into jeopardy. So I would prefer that we have a solid deadline. They have to have their fingerprints done by, end of the year. I mean, it doesn't take that long. And if they don't, then what do? They can't dispense. I mean, I'm looking at it from a consumer protection, and this concerns me that we have 500 people that have never been fingerprinted. And one other question. So they got their license, so the medical board never required them to be fingerprinted?
They did not retroactively they potentially did not retroactively fingerprint individuals when the law was instated that it was required to have anybody that was renewing be fingerprinted.
So the medical board allowed these folks to renew their license without being fingerprinted? Is that what happened?
Yes.
So I have a question. Since we are having to spend so much staff time to clean this up, can we bill the medical board?
Sure. Why not?
I'm asking. I mean, if we're now having to take money out of our staff time to clean up the mess, and it's a mess that if the medical board didn't take responsibility for it, there should be some accountability there. And I think we should write a letter to the medical board and ask them to reimburse us costs for what we have to incur to clean this up. And I'll make a motion for that. I'm seeing everyone's pops out.
Let's hold a few more comments. There's additional comments, or did you want to make?
I just,
Gonna tell me I can't do it.
I think we need to be careful from a Bagley-Keene perspective right now because the reporting of this is under, it's okay under the licensing report, but to the extent we're really getting into policy decisions and voting on things that relate to this specific issue and what happened, my recommendation would be set it for the next agenda as a future
Okay.
agenda item. And then you could have the full discussion, the full voting. I'm concerned that it's not specifically called out on the agenda.
Okay, so then I would like an agenda item asking the executive officer of the medical board to come to our next board meeting and explain why they didn't take care of this. They passed it on to us, and now we have to clean up the mess. And at that point, I'd also like the agenda item to state that we'd like to discuss billing the medical board.
Thank you.
That's it.
Other comments, Mr. Mordomi?
That's a hard act to follow. I don't think this is an instance where we need to grant a special status for these 500 people. That said, we have a lot of flexibility in the tone of the letter that we send, right? I mean, if the letter says you are delinquent in the first paragraph, then that sends a certain message. If it says something like we need your fingerprints, please get it done, it's important, et cetera, that sends a different message. And I think I'll leave it to the EO's discretion as to the tone of that letter. With making sure there's with an eye toward, well, if the good optometrist can have that letter and wave it around saying, hey, I'm not in trouble yet, right?
Ms. Garcia?
I don't want to just change the subject altogether, but on an agenda item, the last meeting, I had asked if we have very specific flow of what it's going to take, or it's taking staff to be able to get this process. I'm sort of hearing a something about it? I mean, is it taking like 5 applicants a day for you to do this input manually? How much time is it taking to get everything caught up? I think we had talked about that as an agenda item. I didn't see it, so.
Is that something you'd like to go into?
We'll add that for future agenda items. Let's bring it up under future agenda items.
I think some of it was reported today, right? I mean, I would say if you want to continue it and a more deeper level, I would set it as a future agenda item.
Okay.
And also to clarify one thing, not all of the licensees that we don't have fingerprints for are currently delinquent. Some of them are active because their license just hasn't expired or hasn't
Okay.
come to the expiration date yet.
Okay, that's good to
So
know.
it's not all of them that are potentially being impacted.
Dr. Tereski?
Just to Rachel's point, I don't know, I would be uncomfortable asking the EO of the medical board to come and explain why her board didn't follow through on the fingerprints with these folks. I mean, we got to work with the med board, especially on issues with refractions and a few other things. And it would just seem like we would, you know, you're just sort of poking the bear if you're doing that when it's not really, it's going to cost us some money and some time. But, you know, we bought this car, we might as well just, you know, pay to get it tuned up and fixed.
Well, we didn't buy this car. It was,
Well, we were given this car.
we were given without our input because we weren't included in the final negotiations on this car. So I disagree. I think there needs to be some accountability. I think that, you know, we have a responsibility to the public to make sure that these folks are fingerprinted. I think it was an oversight that, you know, and it's not about the money, it's about public protection. You don't know what will come up in a live scan of people who are trying to have the privilege of having a license in the state of California. And for us to assume the responsibility because it was thrown on us when, in my opinion, the medical board didn't do their due diligence in making sure this was completed before they gave us the program, I think there needs to be accountability. And I think we have a responsibility now that it's under us for consumer protection.
Okay.
This isn't about money or anything. It is a consumer protection issue. So I disagree. Maybe it's not the EO, maybe it's whoever over, you know, but there needs to be, someone has to stand up for the public and the consumers. And I'm going to do that. And I think part of it is having a public discussion on why this fell through the cracks.
I think requesting a representative of the medical board instead of demanding that
There
the
you
EO
go.
come here, I think that would be a better way of just going about it. Just requesting an explanation of why these folks didn't get their fingerprints and what was the process that led to that. And that I'd agree with, just asking for clarification. But
But at the same point, the executive officer is the CEO of the medical board. You go to the decision maker. The executive officer is ultimately responsible for what happens under the entire board.
Correct.
So, I mean, I would leave it to the discretion of our chair to figure out who the appropriate person is. But I think it has to be someone who can answer the question and who's a decision maker when it comes to how this issue is handled.
Okay.
Ms. Murphy?
Appreciate and will, yes, we will look into with staff work how we can make this a part of the agenda for January or February so that this discussion can happen more fully.
I'd like to go back to the notifications or communications to those that are falling into this category. I just want to make sure that we understand that depending on how well we craft this communication, it may either increase the burden on staff or decrease it. So if we're not complete enough in our communication, because this is kind of a gray area that all these people are in right now. And so if the communication is very clear, then we are not going to be fielding calls at the board office. If the communication is just generalized, then we're going to start fielding possibly 500 calls more than once a week. So I just want to be mindful of that as we're crafting that communication, okay?
So I'd like to add to your comments. I think it's perfectly appropriate to be apologetic in the introductory paragraph for their time and inconvenience. Second, be clear that we're doing a regulatory cleanup this is what is required of you in order to be, fully licensed in the state of California. Third paragraph, clearly, this is required. Please have it done by January 10th. Thank you very much. I mean, I think it needs to be, we respect your time. We're so sorry. This is what's required. Please do this by this date, so that your staff is not inundated with, 500 phone calls. I don't think that you have the time to field them. But, I mean, if I received that letter, I'd say, okay, great, I'll find LiveScan and get that done. Now, my question is how much time, it's kind of a bad time of year, so how much time is a reasonable amount of time to get fingerprinted? Is January 10th a reasonable amount of time, given that it's Thanksgiving and Christmas, New
Yeah. Year's? I probably do do you think so? Can you also, I don't know if it's there, is there like a link to where people can find the live scans? I mean, I know like where I live, it's at a church. Is there, it is? Oh, okay. Maybe make sure to link that so they know.
Absolutely.
And they can see exactly where it is.
Yeah, and give them as many resources as they can to find the live scan, how to make sure everything's updated, so that, again, we're conserving staff time. But
Is
I
it
think
the same cost regardless of where you go?
And then
Oh,
to
it's
add to
not.
that, great, I like the letter, the outline that you're discussing. Could that same letter, again, when you're dealing with the larger corporations, can they also go to their home office and say, this is what we've sent out to your SLDs and your CLDs, this is what they're getting. Is there a possibility to add that, just to keep them aware? Because I think what's going to happen is that they're going to be dealing with home office and saying, this is going on with our licensing, what do we need to do? Because there's some responsibility, accountability within the companies too. And if a letter that you're talking about could also go to them, would be good. I don't know.
I don't know that we need that because
Okay,
we're not dealing with a lot
okay.
of licenses. It's going to be less than 500 probably. So I don't know how
And
critical that is.
it's individual licenses. They need to be responsible for their licenses, so you don't need.
Any last comment from the board? Ms. Swan, did you have a
Oh, I just
comment?
said it was a tenth of the population.
Approximately, I'm sorry, a tenth?
1/10, yeah. There's 4,900 spectacle lens dispensers and contact lens dispensers combined, which makes up the population of fingerprinted lens dispensers. And then there's approximately 500 impacted licensees.
Any closing comments on this topic to my right? Left?
So the other update
Okay, that's on, now we'll let you continue.
that I wanted to bring up.
I'm sorry, it appears we have one question, Mr.
Would it be
Mordomi.
helpful to get some public input on this
Yeah.
topic of communication, et cetera?
You could do it now, or you could do it after the whole section. It's up to you.
The other issue that was brought up at the last board meeting was the processing time for the RDO applications. In working with staff, we determined that the processing times were a little bit less than what had been noted to consumers when they were calling in. So we're going to be a little more precise in our processing times going forward. We also created a web page on the Optometry website for processing times that can be updated as often as needed, so that consumers can get a general understanding of how long it's going to take for their license or the application to be processed.
On that page, is there a separation for paper and online?
No, there's not. And I remember the email that you sent to me. The vast majority of the applications that we're receiving are online. So, and we are encouraging on the website, we're encouraging everyone to utilize online because it is faster. When you send it in a paper application, it takes 2 to 4 weeks possibly for that payment to be cashiered, and then the processing time starts after the cashiering phase.
I have a question. Looking at that, it says that that they have passed the CLRE exam. What is that exam? I'm curious on that paragraph.
I'm not sure.
Okay.
It's the California laws and regulations exam,
And is that for optometrists?
optometrist.
Okay, thanks.
Hi, my name is Arsha Kazmi. I'm the lead licensing analyst for our board. So the CLRE that you are referring to is actually the optometrist law exam for the state of California.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Any other questions on this topic, Mr. Morodomi?
On the executive director's report. So on the enforcement program, how has the staff turnover affected our ability or our processing times on our enforcement matters? Or can you predict how it will affect?
Sure. So we have had some movement in the enforcement unit, and also Cherie has been wearing 2 hats as enforcement lead and as acting assistant executive officer. So, the timeframes have been impacted somewhat, but nothing significant. Processing times for enforcement cases are still far better than many other programs within DCA. I can assure you.
And I assume, of course, you're, as always, looking at the higher priority cases where there's public harm and addressing those sooner
Absolutely,
rather
those
than
are
later.
priority,
Yeah.
but we're also working the oldest ones first, but as simple ones come in, we try to take care of those relatively quickly. So.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Any other questions from the board? To my right? And then to my left. Thank you again for serving in your role and for
Thank you for
closing
having me.
out with such an intense discussion and
Yes.
bearing with
That's okay.
us. We truly appreciate your service and how you helped us, and the best of luck in your prior position that you're going back
Thank you
to.
very much, and thank you for allowing me to work with such a fine group.
Thank you very
And I
much.
loved the board packet with the Google Docs and all that. I don't know who did it, but that was great. So thank you. That was awesome. So easy to scroll through it. So I appreciate that.
I just wanted to take the opportunity to thank John as well. In the last 2 days, you've well prepared me to at least sit up here and not be a deer in the headlights. There's a lot to do, and I appreciate the leeway. And this board meeting as well, I appreciate everyone coming together with a light agenda, but giving me an opportunity to be in the room with all of you to hear your concerns, to understand how you're setting up for the next year. And thank you so very much for so ably taking care of everyone and helping them to feel as best possible during this transition, and helping me to feel as best possible and coming here today so quickly. Thank you.
Don't leave yet.
Don't leave it.
I'd like to make a motion that the board draft a letter to send to the director and place in John's personnel file, thanking him for the excellent work that he's done in getting us through this initial phase till we had our new EO.
Second. Let's take a vote.
Do we have to have a roll call? Oh, we do? Oh. Dr. Turetsky.
Aye.
Ms. Michelin, aye. Dr. Shaw is absent. Ms. Garcia.
Aye.
Dr. Kawaguchi.
Aye.
Dr. McIntyre.
Aye.
Mr. Moradami.
Aye.
Ms. Salazar-Sperber.
Aye.
Dr. Wong.
Aye.
Ms. Brandwein.
Aye.
Motion carries.
Thank you again.
Thank you very much.
Parking is validated on your way out.
We're going to go ahead and take a 10-minute break. I'd like to recap where we are in our agenda before the next speakers come forward. So we just started the Executive Officer's Report A, and half of the agenda item for A was completed by John Brooks. And now we're moving on to the onboarding efforts piece, which Patrick Lee will be providing an update from DCA. And we are going to take agenda item number 9 out of order so that we can use his time to talk about both topics. I'd also like to say that After we get to agenda item E, then I'll be turning to the public for comment on A through E. But we're treating the whole report as the one agenda item to then get comment on. So Mr. Lee, if you'd like to pick up with the second half of that, of A.
Absolutely. Good morning, President Brandwein, Vice President Turetsky, Executive Officer Murphy, and members of the board. First of all, thank you so much for allowing the department an opportunity to provide an update to your board. For the record, my name is Patrick Clay. I'm the Assistant Deputy Director for Board and Bureau Services at the Department of Consumer Affairs. And before I start, the department would like to extend a warm welcome to Executive Officer Murphy. We're so incredibly excited to have you on board. Welcome to the DCA family. And as always, if the department can be of a resource for you or for board members, please feel free to reach out at any time. I thought I'd start with agenda item 6A, the status of the department's onboarding effort for the new executive officer of the board. You'll be happy to know that we gave Ms. Murphy all the basic equipment for her to become an executive officer. She has a phone, a computer, an email address, and we're actually so high-tech at DCA that she also has high-speed internet. But in all seriousness, the department had an opportunity to meet with Ms. Murphy a few days ago where we went over basic administrative onboarding procedures, which included a reminder her to file her Form 700 related to financial disclosure, but also a list of trainings that the executive officer will have to take within the next few weeks, which include basic state supervision, which covers the nuances of managing civil servants, sexual harassment prevention training, as well as defensive driver training if Ms. Murphy plans to drive for her state functions, as well as information technology security awareness training. Within the next few weeks, the department will be working with Ms. Murphy to set up one-on-one meetings between herself and our department heads, which will include, but not limited to, our Chief of Human Resources, our Chief for the Division of Investigation, Budgets, as well as Communications, Legislative Affairs, and the Equal Opportunity Office, as well as other DCA entities. So that's the onboarding procedures, and again, if Ms. Murphy needs anything from the department, Board and Bureau Services team is here to assist. So with that, I'll move directly to agenda item number 9, the DCA update. My first report is regarding the Director's Quarterly Meeting. As you know, the department, Director Grafilo and the department is hosting and will continue to host quarterly meetings, and these are an opportunity for executive officers and bureau chiefs to meet directly with the director and department staff to go over key issues facing the department and its boards and bureaus. The department hosted 2 quarterly meetings since the last time we met, one in August and another one this past Monday. The quarterly meetings included presentations from the Department of General Services, or DGS, DCA's Equal Employment Opportunity Office, and DCA's Office of Human Resources. The Department of General Services previewed their plan for new construction that will house all of the Department of Consumer Affairs in 2024. The Equal Employment Opportunity Office provided a presentation on implicit bias for all of the executive officer. And the Office of Human Resources shared some new improvements to our internal human resource process specific to recruitment and adverse actions. The department also presented this past Monday an update on the salary study and efforts on legislative implementation of AB 2138. My next update is regarding DCA leadership training. The department held its kickoff meeting with the second cohort of the Future Leadership Development Program back in September. And if you remember, this Future Leadership Development Program was an initiative launched in August of 2017 to develop and mentor DCA staff across all of our boards and bureaus. The program includes executive mentoring from DCA staff, customized leadership training, and project management. My next update is regarding the licensing and enforcement work groups, and this is for your benefit, Ms. Murphy. The Department of Consumer Affairs is hosting monthly licensing and enforcement work groups. These are forums where all licensing and enforcement staff from across all DCA boards and bureaus are meeting to share best practices on licensing and enforcement processes. To give you a couple of examples of some of these best processes, the Board of Registered Nursing shared their cloud drive technology that allows schools to upload transcripts, student transcript directly into the cloud, which allows the board to directly access these records and streamline and automate the licensing process. This past August, the licensing work group also discussed a tool to streamline letters to licensees, and this tool allows for automated generation of these letters. And this tool is available to all Breeze programs and will soon be available to all programs at DCA. So these are a couple examples of some of the best practices that comes out of these spaces. My next update is regarding the Substance Abuse Coordination Committee. As you recall, the department reconvened the Substance Abuse Coordination Committee. Per Senate Bill 796, the committee has been tasked with examining the standards that are being used for dealing with licensees that are also substance abusers. Per the bill, the committee is currently determining if the existing criteria needs to be updated based on research, recent development in testing research and technology, and report back January 1st of 2019. Per statute, the committee is made up of all of the Healing Arts Board's executive officers, a designate from the Department of Healthcare Services, and is chaired by the Director of the Department of Consumer Affairs. And Ms. Murphy, we're excited to have you on that committee for a future meeting. As an update, this committee met this past Tuesday and examined the issue of drug testing frequency for licensees who are in probation or in a diversion program. The committee determined to add some exceptions that boards may use to lower the drug testing frequency for these licensees. And then my next update is regarding the salary study, which I know is a topic of interest for many boards. As you know, the department has awarded a contract to conduct a salary study of executive officers. As a refresher, the contractor will be expected to provide a comprehensive, independent review and assessment of board executive officer salary levels and evaluate changes that have occurred subsequent to a previous salary study that was conducted in 2011. This new study will assess the programmatic changes that have occurred over the past few years and how these changes have increased the operational complexity of our boards. This study will help determine the degree to which these changes will support compensation augmentation. There are key goals that the department would like to focus on through this salary study. First is to synthesize data and collect information to evaluate the salary bands of DCA programs and make determinations on how the data may or may not suggest augmentation for a program's salary level. Second, determine what critical factors are used to support a compensation increase in the review process. And finally, evaluate gender parity for executive officer salaries across all DCA programs. And finally, we're also going to look at the equivalent of EO positions from other states and see how they deal with these challenges. The study is underway, and an estimated completion time is early 2019. And then my final update is board member orientation training. And as you know, board member orientation training is required within 1 year of appointment or reappointment to a board. The training is a one-day training held here in Sacramento. The next one is December 5th, 2018, and we have future dates for 2019 coming through. And as always, you can work with the executive officer to schedule the training date or get in touch with Board and Bureau Services to get the training scheduled. So short update, I will conclude it here now and take any questions that the board may have.
I have a question for you.
Yes.
As someone who needs to redo the BMOT, there's a way to sign up online for that. And what is the process? Is there a confirmation received? Because just from personal experience, I've left messages trying to schedule my orientation, and then I applied online. They even had me picking my lunch, that I wanted that day, and that was about a month ago, and I haven't heard anything, no confirmation. So in what form do I receive that confirmation?
Sounds good. We'll double check and make sure that you are confirmed from the training, and we'll send you an email or call you to make sure that you're signed up. Are you thinking of taking the December 15th?
Oh, yes,
Yeah,
I need to do it.
We'll
In
double
fact,
check.
I'm overdue because I can't get through
Sure.
to get anyone to return my
We'll
call.
follow up.
And I'm just hoping that no one else is experiencing the same kind of difficulty that I am.
Sounds good. Thank you for flagging that.
Any
I have a follow-up question to that. Are there going to be any plans to do them in Southern California?
Not at this time. For now, we'll continue to have them in Sacramento, but we're looking at different options to see how we can cater to board member locations.
So should I hold out then, or?
For now, I highly recommend to just sign up for the training.
I have a question. Will you be notifying board members when we are due to take it? I think it's every 2 years we need to renew it. Will you be
Yeah,
notifying?
generally we work directly with the executive officer
And they will
since we both share
let us
records
know.
of when
Okay.
board members are appointed and when they need to take the training.
Yeah.
But absolutely, we can keep you in the loop and when
Yeah.
you are due for your trainings.
Okay.
But it's, I heard you say it's 1 year after your appointment
It's
or
within
reappointment.
1 year of appointment and reappointment.
Or reappointment. Okay. So I just got reappointed, so I have a year.
That's correct.
Any other questions? I'd like to thank you personally, as well as Mr. Castrillo, for all of your help during this EO transition period. It's been exceptional and extraordinary, and you all went to great lengths. So thank you very much the last few months in particular.
Absolutely. Thank you very much.
Now that
Thank
the
you.
president has thanked you, I have 4 more questions. Can you send us a link or a copy of that 2011 EO salary study? So
Sure,
we can
it's underway, but when the
no,
final...
this is the 2011.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I'll double check our records. I think it might be available online, but I'll double check if we can.
Because I'd be interested in seeing what other EOs make even as of 2011. Second question, will you be here when we discuss AB 2138?
Yes.
Okay, good, because it affects us, but it affects every other board. Is there any discussion, is there anything you can tell us about, I guess, transition happening in DCA in general with the change of administration? I guess in the next coming months, people will be jumping ship or moving to other positions as opportunities come up. We are a beneficiary, actually, of that. It's people like Dean, maybe like yourself, maybe moving into other positions, so our relationships will be different. Is there any kind of transition plan?
Sure, yeah, absolutely. As you know, this will be a very interesting time in the next few months. I think, the general thought is that these things are incredibly difficult to predict and plan out. Obviously, a lot of these decisions will be up to the next governor and the next administration. I think folks at the department, have expressed an interest in staying on board, and I think those interests have been communicated. But again, these things are a bit out of our control. We're hoping that we'll have a smooth transition, and as soon as the new administration comes in, I think there will be a commitment to work with this administration to ensure that no matter the decisions that have been made, we can commit to creating an environment where there will be a smooth transition with the least disruption for our boards and our bureaus.
And then last, thank you for all that you're doing in terms of transition of our new EO. But what I didn't hear, and I'd be interested in hearing maybe from you or from our EO, is we rely upon our EO for expertise in the particular subject matter of optometry and optician regulation. Is there any thought as to training her on the specifics of our own regulations and our own processes specific to optometrists and opticians?
Sure. I mean, I'll say right out of the gate, Ms. Murphy has access to all of the resources of the department that we can offer. If there are particular challenges that come up during the transition or after, I think we're happy to identify them and figure out where can the best training can come from, whether it's sitting down with our DCA legal team, our legislative affairs team, where we have our ledge analysts that can either brief the EO on the legislative context or tools that are available for particular legislation. If it's regulations, obviously we have DCA legal team. But depending on the challenge, we're happy to raise the right folks and have them available to the executive officer.
Okay, because kind of as a word of warning, in future meetings, we often look to the EO and say, how does this work? Or, what does the regulation say? Of course, Mina is there too, but there will be that expectation in the future.
We've talked about how the law is her Bible and the regulations, and we've set up a weekly meeting at least for now, and if she's available, I'm available to her by email or telephone conference at any point in time. But weekly, we're going to be meeting and talking about each aspect of the program and talking about the laws and regulations and how they currently stand and what they need to, whether the program needs to change based on amendments to the law. So she'll be getting up to speed.
Also know for a fact that Ms. Murphy sleeps with a practice act and a copy of your strategic plan under her pillow every night.
Nightstand, not on my pillow. But it is also, getting through today has kind of been the plan for this week.
I get it.
But yes, certainly familiarizing myself with the regulations, understanding the code, understanding the handbook as well, because that, of course, I know you will look to me as well as the role of board member and what best practices are. And I know that board members have made themselves available to me, and I've already set time with Ms. Michelin and Dr. Turetsky. And so it's my intention before that meeting to get through as much as I can to be able to come with some questions. But I understand the expectation and appreciate your stating such, and will work my hardest to get to a point where I can be a good resource for the board.
Thank you very much.
Other questions or comments from? No. All right, thank you again.
Thank you very much.
All right, I'd like to ask if Ms. Kimball would like to come up to deliver the enforcement program. C, we did get B from Mr. Brooks.
Good morning, board members. So the enforcement report was very short this time. Mainly what we've been working on is our caseload and working on updating and drafting procedure manuals for all of the processes that happen in the entire board. But for us specifically, for the enforcement unit, there's a lot of things that we do, and we want to make sure that we're accurately capturing that so that we can properly train and onboard new staff. As well as just so that we remember, because sometimes there are things that we do that we don't do very often because we're not a very big board. And so when that thing that comes up like once every year and a half, we have to have something to reference sometimes to remember what we're doing. So we've been working on that, and that's really my update for enforcement, unless you had any questions about that or about the stats.
So, on these handbooks and guides,
Yes.
I totally endorse that, and I'm so glad you're doing this to pass on knowledge. At some point, I think the board would be, I would be interested as the Consumer Protection Committee member to see those after they're done. I think I would just kind of caution as you're developing these handbooks, to develop them with the eye toward, best practices and how, as opposed to rulemaking in the handbook. I mean, it's kind of a vague line, but in my experience with other board members have gotten. Board members and other boards have been very upset when they look at a handbook and it's kind of like and it becomes like a regulation or a policy decision. So just be mindful of that distinction.
Yes.
And good job.
Yeah, and that is what we're mindful of. What we're working on is tracking the steps that we take for each process. And as we go, we're looking at the way that we've been doing them and also kind of exploring what best practices other boards may use or what ways that we can make a process more efficient or better for us. So that way we're not just doing everything the way it's always been done. We're looking at how we can do it better.
I don't even know if you can speak to this, but at our last meeting, there was briefly noted that Stanton Optical had received a large number of fines. I think it was totaling over $500,000 between all of their locations. Is there any update on that, or is that something that can't be discussed at this time?
I can tell you,
Be careful,
I
because
will.
you will be the ultimate reviewers and decision
I
makers. So if it's
understand. No,
public
I'm just-
knowledge, if
The
it's.
public
okay.
information I can share.
That's all I want. I just want to know where this stands, if it's being adjudicated or what's going on.
So the majority of the citations have been appealed to administrative hearing, and they will be heard. Currently, it's scheduled for February at the Administrative Law Office.
Any other questions from board members? Ms. Kimball? Am I right? Left? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
So I'd like to call upon our staff member, Ashra Kazmi. She'll be delivering the examination and licensing programs report.
Thank you once again for having me. So we're basically wrapping up our busiest season right now with licensees that just graduated in 2018. We still have a lot of stranglers coming in, last minute appliers, but everything is, from my understanding, up to par. We are currently looking at processing times of about 2 weeks. So that's from everything being sent in to them taking the law exam. So I basically look at when they take the law exam as their final step, and I'm going based off of those dates. So we are looking at about 2 weeks out. We are currently now, if you look at the statistics, we are getting an uptick of applications this in September and October, because now the 2019 folks are starting to apply that will be graduating in May of 2019. As for moving forward with Breeze, we are currently in the talks with them in regards to BOLs. And moving forward on that. Everything seems to be going pretty well. Now that we have Shara on board, we're hoping it'll streamline even better. And then finally, I met with our exam vendor earlier in September. Later in September, I should say, and so they do have. We were able to see the facilities, how they conduct the exams, and it was very nice to just see that. And I was able to actually get an intimate view of how our applicants go and take their exam, and how well it is privacy-wise, and how caring they are for us. And so those would be the updates I have for you guys. Do you have any questions?
Any questions from board members? Dr. Kawaguchi?
It's really not a question, it's more of a comment for you as you are becoming an expert in these processes. We would be interested as a board if there are suggestions that you have of ways that we can affect streamlining things to make the process easiest for applicants as well as easy for our staff to process through, to continue to work on process times. But I know that you being on that front line, you're going to see some opportunities. So we would be interested in your report of you offering suggestions of things that you feel the board needs to support you on to get changed.
Thank you very much for saying that, Doctor. Actually, I have been. I've been in this position now for a little over a year, and there were a lot of things that I saw that I felt in just processing times, because I understand right when everybody graduates, they have loads of student debt, and they are always worried about, hey, can you hurry up and get me licensed to, because I have a job waiting, they're interested in me. So I've been trying to see, especially in our busiest time, how to streamline this process. And I've actually been already in talks with our Breeze team to be able to kind of be able to, I guess, streamline is, I guess, the best way of saying it, some of the processes that go into this licensing aspect of. So I will definitely be updating you on some of that. Absolutely.
I think that's a great idea. And then also, usually in April, we have board representatives that go to each of the optometry schools. So if there's any information that we can share with the graduating students, I know that I had numerous emails and calls regarding delayed licensing
Yes.
from so many students. So if there's any way that we can pass on information to the students at their April orientation or meetings, it would be
I
great.
definitely agree with you, Dr. Wong. I actually also were getting those licensed, those phone calls. They were very fun to deal with. But I think like one of the things that everybody forgets, and I don't know why. Overnight in May, from having 50 to 75 applicants, we just randomly had like 300 or so. So, and this is overnight, and we do come with first come, first served basis. So, but yes, I will definitely let you know when that happens and what I can provide to you in regards to trying to help them out as well.
Do you have an average processing time for the applicants all the graduates that are applying in May? Because I think we talked to them about how great Breeze is and there's this online application. So for this generation, when we say the process is quick, their definition of quick
Tomorrow.
Yeah, exactly. So I think when we talk to them in April at our regular presentations, if we can give them a realistic idea of
Yes.
what kind of wait time for them to expect, because I think most of them were expecting to be licensed by July, and I don't think that happens. So
Right. So like a lot of times I have received a lot of calls with Berkeley students, of course, and it makes sense because they didn't know what Breeze was, so now I understand why. So the fun thing about students is that I agree with you. They think it's tomorrow that it's going to happen. Now, one of the things that John has left for us, and I appreciate that so much, is that website. So they will be able to track their times more accurately in regards to how many weeks, what's going to happen, where they're going to go. Maybe we can even later on add detail for new applicants. Now, one of the other major things that graduate students forget is that NBEO does not release scores till after they graduate.
So if you could at least, I guess, maybe forward that information to us so
Yes.
that when we talk to them,
Absolutely.
they now know, oh, it's not just, oh, you graduated.
Yeah,
you can
no,
apply.
it's not just they graduated. They still,
need
NBO
grades,
still
we
needs
need
to release
NBO.
scores.
Great.
Berkeley needs to send those transcripts out. So yes, it's a fun process all in all.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
And I have an opportunity. We just started on optometry program, a degree program as well. And they also need to go through their licensing and taking their exam too. So there's a good opportunity for us to connect with you in that regards.
Absolutely.
It'll happen in the future. They're going to be graduating next year. And I would like to be in touch, I guess, with our executive officer about that and get her more involved with the college, maybe come and talk to them. And especially when some of them will be graduating and will be taking the exam next year. So let's see how soon we can, or how quickly we can get you there and start talking to those students too. And then how we're going to connect with Breeze with them. That'd be great.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely.
If at some point, if we were to ask for demographic information in terms of like where the opticians and optometrists are, like on a county basis, do we have a capability of spitting out a report like that?
I can definitely try to see. I'm kind of looking at Shuri because she's our our Qbert guru. So
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm not going to ask right now, but I'm just curious.
Thank you for not asking right now.
Because access is always an issue for us, and I am concerned about kind of rural counties and the availability of optical services. Okay, thank you.
Any other questions or comments? Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
So on budget, we have it looks like two analysts who will be stepping forward. Marquito and Wilbert Rumboa.
Sid, before they start, can I ask a question of request of them as they gave their presentation? When you go through the budget report and go through the numbers, when you reference numbers, can you like tell us what page it's on and which line item you're looking at and all that,
Yes.
so I can follow along?
Absolutely.
Okay, thank you.
Good morning, board members, Executive Officer Murphy. We're from the DCA Budget Office, and we'd like to provide you with a current budget update in regards to the Board of Optometry and the Registered Dispensing Optician Program. I'm gonna tell you guys what your expenditures are as of September 30th, and what we project you guys to expend till the end of the fiscal year. So the first item I'm going to go over is the expenditure projection for the Board of Optometry. So as it stands, as of September 30th, the current expenditures of the board, it's going to be at $243,000, and it's the total expense line at kind of the bottom of the page.
What piece of paper are you looking at?
It's the Board of Optometry expenditure projection. So I'll go over the expenditure projection first, and then I'll talk about the fund condition afterwards. Yes. Okay. All right. So as of September 30th, the board has expended from their $2,008,000 budget. The board has currently expended $243,000 of that budget, and I have projected you guys to revert roughly $99,000 towards the end of the fiscal year. And the way that we come up with these projections, if you look at the form in front of you, typically I utilized a 3-year average based on the past 3 years, and based on conversations with your previous staff, we came up with contracts that you might be encumbering this year, and any expenses that might be hitting the I guess all your particular line items. Does anyone have any particular questions of any line items that they want to go over?
So in general, where is the windfall coming from?
In terms of your reversion, or so based on my projections, it looks like you guys are going to be saving a little bit in the evidence witness line item and the general expense, and obviously some of the personnel services, because of the fact that you have several staff members that have gone and new members that have come on board. Please keep in mind that this Budget Act column, the last column, the last yellow column, those numbers are going to be changed once the governor's budget is released. That's what we're currently working on right now. So this column is going to change based on employee comp, retirement, any budget change proposals, or any executive orders that we're working on right now. So you're probably going to revert a little bit more, because the average reversion for the board has typically been over the past 3 years roughly $250,000. No questions on line items? One more question, okay.
Okay, so some of this reversion is not our preference, obviously. So with the new budget coming out, we're not going to be hit with a budget that's too overly aggressive, considering the fact that we've been running under, undesirably running under, with things like staffing.
So in terms of that, what we look at when we're projecting your budget outwards, we typically are in conversations with the program staff because they know all the items that are going to be expended throughout the year. Like if there's going to be any type of case like law enforcement cases or any equipment that needs to be purchased, those are items that we discuss with the either the EO or any of the staff members, and we'll project that into your expenditure projection to ensure that bottom line that you don't blow your budget.
I have a question. So, since we have extra money, can the board add a line item if it's pertaining to an issue that we're passionate about in order to pay for a program? And how would we do that? Like if we had legislation and we said for part of the programming costs, the board would absorb some of the expenses, can we do that?
Yeah, so currently there's something in place of that right now. So for the Board of Optometry, we have internal distributed costs for the board. So the amount that we had discussed and that was passed in the budget change proposal was $86,000. So if you look at the very bottom of this projection, it'll show that $86,000. So that is the amount that you would collect from the RDO program in terms of the oversight of that program.
No, that's not what I'm talking about.
Oh, yeah.
I'm talking about spending new money on a new program. If we wanted to spend money on a new program, how do we get that included in this budget? Do you understand what
Yeah, I
I'm
do.
saying?
So what you're saying is, excuse me. So she mentioned legislation. Am I
Does
all
it
right?
take legislation? I guess my first question, does it take legislation?
If it's through legislation, that's something that during the legislative process, you'd have to identify that in the legislation when we do the fiscal analysis for it. And then if that bill goes through with that fiscal analysis that's been provided to the legislature, that's something you can do what's called a legislative budget change proposal. Other than that, if there's not legislation, that's something you can do through the standard budget change proposal process. You'd submit a request to increase your budget, and that's something you work with the department to put that together and move it forward. And that's something that at the budget office, we work hand in hand with your EO and your staff to make sure that we do that.
Okay. But I guess we could, if we had legislation, we can include, if there's a cost associated to that legislation, we can say that the board is willing to put some of our money into that program to help defray this cost that would come out of the general fund.
Well, it wouldn't come out of the general fund per se. If it's something that you're saying is going to affect your program and you're going to implement it within your program, what you would do is you would identify that during the legislative process. We would submit a budget change proposal. Well, you would submit a budget change proposal. We work with you, and that's something where your appropriation would be increased for that particular purpose. So your budget would be increased.
Okay, but what if we want to use the current money? You're telling me we're going to have extra money, correct? At the end, we have surplus money in the Board of Optometry fund, right? What if we want to use that money?
Oh, absolutely. If there's
So we can,
legislation, yeah, you can. If you can absorb it, you can absolutely absorb it and implement that program.
and we can put it in the budget, the legislative language for that particular issue.
Yeah. So for most like legislation that goes through, it is absorbable within your existing resources. If it's not, then you identify it at that time and then seek additional appropriation.
Okay.
Yeah.
Any other questions or comments?
All right, next item I'm gonna go to is the state optometry fund condition. It's called the analysis of fund condition. So please keep in mind this document is a point in time. So this is currently what ties to the fund condition that's displayed on Department of Finance's website. It displays your actuals for 16-17. For 17-18, we're currently working on closing the fiscal year for the program. And for 18-19, on the expenditures line, which is towards the bottom, the 19-16 is your beginning point in terms of what your current appropriation is. And as I stated before, we're currently working on updating that number based off of budget change proposals and executive orders and any budget letters that affect you and your program. As you can see, there's a healthy reserve in the fund. Just keep in mind, typically the board's fund cap is at 24 months, so you guys are doing fairly well. The next item I'm going to go to is the registered dispensing optician expenditure projection. So it's the registered dispensing optician.
Analysis fund condition?
No, the expenditure projection.
Yellow,
The
okay.
yellow one, yeah. So you guys have some double-sided papers. Okay, so the current budget for the RDO program as it stands is $417,000. As of September, the board has expended roughly, or the optician program has spent roughly $38,000 up to September, and we project you to expend $398,000 by the end of the fiscal year.
Does that include the occupational analysis it's going through?
Yes.
Okay.
Technically, again, it doesn't include that portion of it because that was submitted through a budget change proposal.
Okay.
So until we get direction from finance for final decisions, then we can incorporate it into the board's fund condition and appropriation. So as you can see, it you're projected to revert roughly $19,000. So it's pretty close. That's attributed to the fact that you guys have full-time staff members in there now, and you don't have people that are in the blanket. And the enforcement expenditures have typically been going up each year for the RDO program. But overall, bottom line, as long as you guys are in the black, that's what we want to ensure.
Okay.
Does anyone have any questions about the RDO line items? Yes.
Is there any update as to when we're gonna have a joint checking account?
That is up to you guys to decide.
I thought we had decided to have everything merged by 2020, but I don't know where we stand. It just seems silly that we're doing this considering we're all under the same board.
Yes, it would make financial sense to merge the programs, but I know there are some other factors that prevented that. So at this point, we're waiting for the board's decision in regards to how they want to proceed with that, because there's several steps that we have to take as well. If that's something that you guys are going to do or are willing to do.
So is that something we should be discussing at the next meeting, or?
Let's just add it.
Wouldn't it be better to do it at the beginning of the next fiscal? So if we were gonna do it, we'd wanna make it going forward for the next fiscal year. So we wouldn't wanna do anything till July 1 of 2019, correct?
That's what that would be the hope. I mean, there are programs that have been combined in the middle of the fiscal year. It makes it a little bit more complicated. So if that's something that you guys do want to pursue, as a resource, the budget office is here to help you guys.
I think we did have this discussion. We were in San Diego.
Okay.
I remember.
We had preliminary discussions during our budget overview and briefing because that would make things simpler as far as accounting and our ability to understand the budget. And so we have begun to understand what the timeline looks like and what that transition would look like. And I'm glad that we have the decision here, and maybe we go back and look and see if there was definitive action on wanting to do that by a timeline, so that we're able to put together a plan for it.
I think the difference was the Practice Act was 2020. I think the budget was earlier, and it was like July 1, because we wanted to do it at the beginning of a fiscal year. I think it's the April board meeting we had in San Diego. Remember, in the state building?
I think I recall that, and I can go back
Yeah.
and pull that
It
and
was
make
San
sure there was a
Diego.
vote.
Yeah.
April of 2018. Okay.
Yeah,
17.
Yeah.
This was a year and a half ago we
Yeah.
had this discussion.
Okay.
There used to be, our former EO used to have a ongoing, Jessica,
Oh, okay.
had a ongoing that she was bringing to the meetings list, like our to-do list, what our status was and the due dates that we had decided on.
Are you talking
do we
about
have-
the strategic plan?
Yes.
Yes, I think
Sorry,
it wasn't in here because we're doing the light version, but it will be in the next. It's always usually part of the executive officer's report.
But you don't think that was noted within that?
But I recall that vote being taken, so I will pull that and make sure and confer with Ms. Murphy on it.
Yeah, when we report back, if you could tell us the date of the meeting, we can individually also refer back to the minutes. But my recollection is there was some resolution, but that it would not necessarily affect the reporting to the board. I mean, I personally have an interest in seeing how the RDO program is doing, as well as the
Separate and apart from.
as the optometry fund, see if, each is paying for itself. So the reporting to the board is separate from what happens at DCA budgeting. I acknowledge that, but it may not change the reporting to the board.
It was the April 21st board meeting, 2017, in San Diego. That was when we had this discussion and the vote.
It feels like the question is somewhat, I think, punted back to you. Once we merge those funds, would we still have the reporting capability of understanding how those expenditures in fund health work out separately?
Yes.
Okay.
So they would be under different reporting structures, but ultimately be under the Board of Optometry. But there are still identifiers in the system that'll show what expenditures, as long as they're coded correctly, it'll show what expenditures are for the Board of Optometry and the Registered Dispensing Optician Program.
So maybe, Dr. Kawaguchi, to your point, aside from report outs on the strategic plan, how about just straight administrative services, keeping that list going so that we can stay on top of it? Here we go.
Here's from the minutes. Ms. Sieferman reported to the research on the research staff conducted regarding fund merging. Ms. Michelin stated the board previously discussed a 12-month analysis before the merging. Ms. Michelin suggested the board come up with a deadline and put together a work group to monitor and make recommendations to the board. Ms. Sieferman suggested instead of creating another work group, refer to the Ledge Reg Committee. Ms. Brandwein suggested a subcommittee of the Ledge Reg Committee. Public comment, blah, blah, blah. So then Ms. Berber moved to have the legislative committee watch each fund for 12 months and report to the board with recommendations no later than June 30th, 2018. Ms. Brandwein seconded, the board voted unanimously, and the motion passed. So this issue's never come back to the Ledge Reg Committee. I've never gotten follow-up. So I think that's what we need to do next, because our deadline we put on ourselves was June 30th of we already
This
passed
year,
that.
yes.
So maybe we need to push it to June 30th of 2019? Or earlier, or does it have to be earlier to merge the funds by July 1?
Probably
Earlier.
earlier, in order to merge the funds.
Our April meeting, April of 2000.
So that's what, we'd have to amend the motion. We missed the deadline. Thank you.
With the transition of EOs.
Yeah, well, I'm just saying that, you know, we need to, if that's what we want to do, I'm assuming we'd have to have another motion and another, correct? Since that motion is kind of dead now.
So that becomes a future agenda item, or?
It could be a part of this budget analysis.
So we could make a motion.
I think you've already made your intent clear. It's just
Okay.
implementing it now. So I don't think you need another motion, actually.
Okay.
So what, I guess, Michael, so what's the plan? I mean, we,
Next step.
yeah.
Isn't the plan, it has to go to the committee and the
Right.
committee needs to start working on it, right?
So.
Well, I guess, Mike, I would say, do we have to do that, considering it's been over 12 months that we've been, can we just have a motion and a second to merge the funds? If that's the intent of what we want to do, why go through the effort of having it through the Ledge Reg Committee? We're all here. If we want to say, let's move forward with the steps to take to merge the funds, let's do it.
I think when we had that vote, there was some concern that the opticians fund was going to be a financial drain. And since the fees have been increased on certain things with the opticians, it's obvious it's not going to be a financial drain, so there's really nothing to monitor anymore.
Correct.
We know it's okay.
Correct.
Yeah,
I
so
would
we
say
might as
let's-
well merge them.
Yeah, that's what I would do.
Are we making a motion?
Why move to merge the two funds together?
By the next.
Beginning of the next fiscal year.
I will second that motion.
Okay. Call for discussion first amongst board
Get to
members.
work on that.
We have to have discussion on the board, discussion from the public, and then we'll take the vote. Discussion from
Is
the.
that doable?
So I think my only concern here is I can bring it back to the department is I think you may need to seek legislation in order to make this happen. I will double check. You may have to work with the Division of Legislative Affairs. I will go back and double check that. I don't know if you can just say, hey, I want to merge the funds and it's going to happen. So I don't know what it says in statute or anything. So let me go back to the department, figure it out, and then we can get back to you.
So can we then add, can I amend my motion to say that I move that we merge the two funds, and should legislation be required, staff can pursue legislation in order to get the legislative authority to merge the funds.
Do I have a second?
I amend my second to second.
Okay, so now we'll have board discussion on the amended motion. Mr. Morodomi.
So, I'm okay with the board going forward on this. I personally am not remembering exactly what our concerns were and what we wanted to study over these 12 months. So I'm not ready to vote yes on it. But that's my own personal position.
I do think my recollection is exactly what Turetsky said, was that it was so early in and we didn't really have the DOC going, you know, and I do think it was at the time, there was concern about the RDO program not being able to.
It was running
It was,
negative.
yeah, it was negative. And I think that's why we wanted the 12 months. We knew we were going to be increasing the fees and that type of thing. So now I think that we see that it has money. That's why we were giving us the 12-month leeway. I mean, in theory, we've been watching it. It just didn't go to the Ledge Reg Committee. We've been getting the reports and seeing that it is a solid program now financially. So I don't think, at least from my recollection, that was the concern that we had.
So at the August 20th meeting, I'm looking at the minutes. It says that there was a vote to begin working on updating statute to merge the optometry and RDO program funds, and it did pass. Voted 9-0. So that was a more recent vote, and I think it's similar to what you just said.
So it just
So I
never
believe you already
happened.
had the
Yeah.
discussion to merge it and to have staff work on updating the statute.
But I think now we've got, with this motion, if we need legislation, we can get the approval to move forward with legislation.
Does that seemed to be part of August.
August 2019?
18?
That's, I'm sorry, April 20th, 2018.
It appears that statute was,
Can you go over that again to see if we need Rachel's motion or not? Ms. Michelin's motion.
Sure. So this was in San Francisco, April 20th, 2018. I'm looking at the minutes. And under the executive officer's report, there was a discussion about the budget. Dr. Tretzky moved to direct staff to begin working on updating the statute to merge the optometry and RDO program funds. Ms. Garcia seconded. The board voted 9-0 and the motion passed.
What date was that?
That was
Which minutes? are you-
April 20th, 2018.
You're looking at the minutes?
Yes.
So it sounds like we've already voted on this.
yes.
But we still need to get legislation to merge them. It sounds like.
Maybe.
Well, I think we just,
Cover
let's cover ourselves so that we don't, because by the time we meet again, it's January, we can find, staff can find someone to author the legislation.
So does your motion still stand, or do you need to amend it further?
I think it stands. We're still merging that's why we want legislation, is to merge the funds.
Is that a
I don't
okay
think you
motion
need
with
to I don't think you need another vote. I think you've already voted on it.
But does that include directing
there's-
staff to
Yes.
get legislation?
Yes, it said it, to change the statute in there.
So what we're asking staff to do is prioritize this.
Yes.
And report back no later than the next meeting
Sure.
on a future agenda.
And I don't think you need a vote for that, or,
No,
yeah,
we're
just your
just
directing staff.
Directing staff.
I withdraw my motion.
Motion withdrawn. Further discussion, we're directing staff.
Correct.
Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you, board president, board members.
All right, now we'll go to public comment. Or no, you still have more to report on.
No, I mean, if you want to look at the RDO fund condition,
Yes.
I know there was concerns about that based on your discussion. So, again, point in time, based off of, if you need to look at the 0175 dispensing opticians fund sheet, it's just the analysis of fund condition. So as you can see, I know you had concerns in regards to the program being a burden. But based on the fee increase, as you look from 16-17 to 17-18, based on the fee increase, it does help the fund because it goes from 7 months in reserve to roughly 12 months in reserve. So current year, again, we're working, or for 17-18, we're currently working on closing out those numbers. And for 18-19, the starting point is $416,000 for your current appropriation. So at this point, the fund is good.
Any questions or comments from the board on this topic? Okay. Now, thank you.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
All right, comments from the public on the executive officer's report, anywhere A through E. Looks like we have a public member coming up.
Catherine Scott representing Luxottica. Just on the last item, I do remember the conversation was, and I think Kara with the California Optometric Association would say the same thing, is making sure that when you're merging, it's not an objection to, it's just clear accounting. Because in the future, when you come for what could potentially be a rate increase in either, both are gonna wanna know we're not funding the other. Not that we're not working collaboratively, we just know both memberships will wanna make sure that. So I do remember that, and wanna make sure we put a mark in that conversation to make sure that as that internal accounting happens, that you have the ability to track both sets of funds. We understood the merging was important to mean managing the funds. Completely appreciate that, but want to make sure we can delineate between the two. Thank you.
Wait,
What?
wait,
Wait?
wait. I just learned that Kat's going to be, has left Luxottica and is going on to bigger and better things. I just wanted to thank you as a board member for the input and the insight and the advocacy you've provided for your clients as well as for the profession. So just a personal thank you.
Thank you very much. It has been a pleasure to work with this board. All of you have been open-minded in some very difficult conversations where the legislature gets in front of you. I can appreciate the frustration, but no, you've all been incredibly helpful and collegial, and it was a difficult decision, but I look forward to hearing how you all move forward with making Loper Hill work on Luxottica in the future. So thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Best of luck to you.
I do have a question, though.
Not
Can't get
so
away.
fast.
No, I appreciate your earlier comment.
Sure.
Politically, does it make a difference when we explain how the funds are used between the two professions, whether it's an internal accounting versus a DCA
I don't
accounting?
think politically, I don't think the legislature will, or you'll have a political difficulty when they're talking about merging the funds, as long as you're clear along the whole time that you can delineate between the two. It's really just for the professions, and I think for the legislature in some way, they're gonna wanna know that each purpose is funding its own profession.
I get that. I
Yeah,
get
so
that.
I don't think politically you'll have an issue with the merger.
I guess, no, my question is a little bit different. Politically, let's say 5 years from now, we want to increase the optometry fees. Will it be acceptable to the professionals and to the legislature if it's our own internal document showing
Yes.
how we spent versus a DCA document that shows how we're spending the funds?
I've seen those documents before in the legislature. I've seen the medical board, delineate out between programs.
Yes.
And then do a fee increase based on that. When you do a fee increase, as you know, so it's probably gonna be required that there's a delineation, that
Yes.
there's a rate study done, I
Yes.
think, or fee study done. So I think you're gonna have to have it anyways in order to also meet California law where you're using the purpose of the funds for the profession. There's also some law around that. But no, I've seen all the boards when they come up in front of the legislature on their fee increases have, multiple funds under their jurisdiction. But it's a good question. I just think, from an accounting standpoint, you're gonna want it anyways. So.
All right, thank you.
And likely our own board reporting.
Hi, my name's Misty Wiggins, and I work with Walmart stores, the Vision Center specifically, for the Northern California area. I want to thank you, before I say anything else, that I do see things that have daily been issues that we've been dealing with our associates, with our opticians, with our policies within the company and how we handle non-licensed or delinquent licenses. I want to thank you that you also have a concern in the same level and that you're addressing those. So I do feel a great hope and relief in that beyond anything I say, regardless. But there are things that we've tried, and what I come to you with is not so much a comment, but what I come to you with is there anything that we can do as being an advocate for opticians? Is there anything that we can do to make the process easier for you? Because in dealing with many, many different opticians, we've even tried something that 3 of us needed to renew at the same time. So we tried a strategy, one online, one mailing it in, and actually I took mine specifically into the office and dropped it off, just to see if there was one way that would be to our advantage. And the results were, there was nothing that really made sense. And to that, the fingerprinting standpoint, after calling, probably after I'd submitted for about 6 weeks, calling once a week to see if it had gone through or if there's any issues. It took me calling until 2 days before my renewal was going to be up to find out that I needed my fingerprints redone. To that point, fingerprints can be done usually the same day. So if you go into your local UPS store, sheriff's department, police department, it's not a hard thing to do, very easy to execute. I'm sure that people, if, very respectfully and apologetically they are introduced to the issue, they won't have a problem doing that. One thing that Ruby had said that I'd like to address as far as the companies informing the companies, most larger companies do pay the registration fees, the costs incurred with registration and licensing. So if they knew that this was going to happen, they could expedite and get this out quicker to keep the process rolling along without having to have multiple opticians explain why or turning in the letters. It could be done from an upper level down. You'll probably see a faster rate of return. I know that sometimes companies even bring a live scanning mobile unit in to help expedite this. So again, if there's anything that we can do as opticians, anything that I can do, I would love to further the profession, to make things easier, to be able to serve our customers, our clients, the public in a more focused way and not have to worry about the paperwork in the background. So, that being said, I do thank you for all you've done. I thank you for the things that you've brought forth, and I do have hope in the program being progressive and coming to a conclusion of no more bumps in the road. Thank you.
I have one question.
Yeah, wait,
Go ahead.
wait, sit. No, you go ahead.
So
You said you were calling once a week to ask about the status of your fingerprinting. Did you get a call back for each of those calls?
I was calling once a week to find out the status on my renewal
Yes.
application. And it was, I was repeatedly being told that it just hasn't processed yet.
Okay.
They're very far behind. And not until the call 2 days prior to my expiration was I told that the issue is that I needed fingerprints again, because I had my fingerprints in, I've done 4 times. Twice with my spectacle and twice with my contact lens.
You mentioned that you wanted help. Do you have any idea specifically what you'd like to do?
If it was a volunteer internship, I don't know what the laws or what the policies would be on that. Even a board of optician advocates volunteering in the area. There's so many people that are really willing to step up and step in and get more involved, but they don't know how or where and what we can really do. If there was something that we can do, we'd be happy to do that. A lot of opticians you'll see are very, very passionate about what they do. There's some that are really not, just as in any field, but there are some that are very passionate. I have opticians that regularly go and volunteer for the medical fair, the health fair at Cal Expo, that are volunteering for VSP to do volunteer services, Foundation for Sight, Prevent Blindness. I have a lot of people that go out regularly and do this. So anything that could help them help the field, I'm sure that we would have a handful of people willing to get on board with that.
So then my question to the board, is that something that could be welcome? I mean, we talked about having interns come in. I don't know. They can come in and help staff with some of these processes. Is that something, I guess that's what Misty's asking, is that something that is permissible?
Here's one recommendation is to participate in the DOC meetings, and then we can take a look at how you can become more involved.
Certainly. Thank you. Oh.
So I wanted to be able to answer to the question, one of the questions you asked, which is how can you or your colleagues better support? So, my suggestion is what you're doing today, which is attending a board meeting. Encouraging your organized leadership to attend our board meetings. As you see here, we have representation from the California Optometric Association. Today, we don't have any representation from optical organizations. So if you are a member of those things, to really encourage the leadership of those organizations to be a part of our discussions and to represent the profession, and to encourage your peers, which is one of the reasons that why we take so much time deciding where we have meetings, is to make it so that we are accessible to not just the public, but also those that are licensed. And as you see today, there's not a lot of people that are taking advantage of that opportunity to communicate with us as a board. And the reason I bring that up is there are certain things that we can only hear together. So if there are concerns from a licensee, in general, there are certain meeting regulations that prevent us from having sub-meetings. And so one of the better ways for the entire board to hear things is by you or your peers attending. So thank you for coming today.
Thank you for letting me.
Any other questions or comments for Ms. Wiggins? All right, thank you. So that will close out. Any additional public comments on the report? Okay, thank you. So we'll go to agenda item number 7, please. And who do we have up to update and the possible action legislative report? Thank you.
So I just wanted to go over these briefly. I think that we've had discussion on these legislation before. So just to provide you with an update on them, AB 2444, which was for the pupil health, that one kind of died in committee and won't become moving forward this year. Senate Bill 1386, which is the one that repeals the branch office license and sets a cap on the number of offices an optometrist may own. That one was approved, signed by the governor and chaptered by the Secretary of State on September 10th. So that will go into effect on January 1st.
Question.
Yes.
I've had a couple of colleagues ask me, okay, so the branch, well, you don't have to have a branch office license anymore. I still have a branch office license, which is good for a year or something. At that point, do I now have to get a statement of licensure instead of a branch office license? And what do I do? And I haven't seen anything on the board's website that will explain what do I do.
So we are still working on the language for the letter that's going to go out to give that information. We're trying to figure out how exactly the law is going to work now that the branch office license isn't needed. And so when we're coordinating with Mina and with board staff to get language that makes sense and that accurately reflects what the law is, so that we can get that out to those people. So hopefully we will have that in the next week or two.
And I'm just assuming that, you know, January 1st comes around and somebody's still got a BOL and they should have an SOL instead. That's not going to result in any issue.
Correct.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, there's just some questions out there from some folks.
So to that point, I was thinking about that too. Is one of the solutions you guys are thinking about just on the SOL, having it where whatever locations you have would just be listed under the SOL? Is that one of the potential solutions, or?
So the way an SOL is set up is that it's specific to a location. So if what we're doing is having them switch to a statement of licensure or an SOL, they would have to have one for each location. but we are not sure yet if that is the avenue that we need to go down. And that's something, like I said, we're working with Mina to make sure what the law supports and how we move forward from here. Moving on to Senate Bill 1480 and 1491. They consolidated some portions of various health-related regulatory programs, and those were both approved by the governor and chaptered by the Secretary of State in September, so they will go into effect on January 1st. And then Assembly Bill 2461, which requires Department of Justice to provide subsequent arrest notifications, that was approved by the governor and chaptered by the Secretary of State on September 7th. Again, it'll go into effect on January 1st. And finally, Assembly Bill 2138, which changed how we can deny licenses and for what convictions. That was approved by the governor and chaptered by the Secretary of State on September 30th, so it will go into effect on January 1st.
Two things. One is I'm very proud that our board thought of and supported SB 1386. I think it's a profound change in the profession. I'd be interested if any of the members of the public have any reaction from their respective professions about what's going to happen now. On 2138, as I mentioned earlier, it affects all the boards, the health services boards. So I do recall it's going to require some new regulations somewhere. I anticipate that we will not need to take the laboring oar on that because those regulations are probably going to be fairly consistent with other healthcare professions. But I'd be interested in hearing what the department is doing to react to that.
I could answer that, Mr. Mordine.
Okay.
It does affect multiple boards and bureaus within DCA. So the Legal Affairs Division has put together a proactive plan. It's already identified the different areas that each attorney has to look at with each program under their assignments. For example, forms for the licensure, looking at what types of questions are asked about the convictions, looking at the regulations related to discipline, including the disciplinary guidelines, which we were doing anyway. And the rehabilitation criteria is important, so we're going to have to look at all of those for regulatory changes. This law does not go into operation until July 1st, 2020, I believe. So we've done a kind of looked at that deadline and backtracked. So at the next meeting, I will be presenting various regulation proposals for you to look at your board meeting related to this, so that we're sure that it takes a long process, as you know, for the regulations to go through. So the laboring oar is on me, and of course, I'll be working closely with Ms. Murphy on that.
Actually, bring back 1386 before I lose the floor. I'll let staff figure out how to implement it, but we don't want to implement or create a kind of branch office light and require, another piece of paper that you have to get or you have to apply for each of the branch offices. I mean, I think the intent of what we wanted to happen with the legislature is you get rid of the branch office license. So with what is it, a cap of 11 or something like that? So just have staff keep that in mind. Yeah, I mean, other professions, they just put their little piece of paper at every location. So I think we want to mimic that.
Yes.
Yeah.
Mina. Okay, so regarding 2138, so just like the last meeting or the meeting before that, we had denied licensure to several optician candidates because of one had a murder conviction, and there was some domestic abuse. There were a lot of other things that had come up. I'm assuming that once this law goes into effect, they can come before the board and they can reapply and try to get a license again?
Well, the law changes so that the board can deny or discipline based on convictions only if the conviction occurred within the preceding 7 years. So they could always reapply if they've been denied under the new law. There are exceptions for that for serious crimes. So, but that's the general shift of the law. But there's also various other reporting requirements and things that you can ask on the application form you can't ask, and implications. So I would say, I haven't looked at that specific issue, but there's nothing would prevent them from reapplying under the new laws.
And I'm also thinking of a couple of optometrists who have come before the board for years trying to get a license, not having committed any. Basically, their issues were they had not been forthcoming with some prior convictions, a few other things, and they've been coming before this board for 10, 12 years. And based on what I'm reading in this law, we can't take that into account because they haven't done anything for the last, in one person's case, the last 15 years. So theoretically, could they just apply and get a license now if they've completed all their CEs and met all the other
Well,
qualifications?
it doesn't go into effect until 2020.
But
So-
based on this,
Okay, go ahead.
So for that specific situation, when a person has lost their license based on a prior conviction and they're seeking the reinstatement of their license, what you're looking at is not just their conviction history, you're looking at their history of discipline before the board, because that's part of the requirements for being reinstated. That's having the discipline itself is a violation of the law, of the Optometry Practice Act. So those are the two things that you're looking at, is not just that the conviction happened, but the discipline that's been happening. Also, if somebody has lost their license due to revocation or surrender because of a disciplinary action, they can't just reapply. They have to petition the board for reinstatement.
would we be able, so if a person's been 8 years out since they've had their license revoked and all that, and now they petition the board, would we be able to take that into account as to what happened previously, or are we sort of stuck with this law saying, okay, you can go, we can unleash you on the public now?
So what you would be looking at is the disciplinary action that the board took against their license. That's not affected by this bill. That's our action that we took. And also just to kind of talk more generally about denials that we've made. I know you brought up the concerns about the denials that you guys did recently. The majority of the applications that we have denied based on criminal convictions would still, with the new law, while it says that we're only to look at convictions within the previous 7 years, it does allow exceptions for severe felonies or severe violent felonies. So the majority of the denials that we've had have either been within
Being those kinds of
Right.
things.
So it
So
would be
that's
if
a
somebody
7-year.
had DUIs, 10, 13 years ago, that would be somebody that we would not be able to deny based on that conviction history. But somebody who had DUIs 5 years ago, 10 years ago, those still be cases for them.
We could or could not.
Could.
After, even without the
If
7
it's a
year.
serious or violent felony, yes.
Okay.
Any other questions? Ms. Kimball? Thank you.
Back legislation. So I think it was Ms. Seiferman's intent to, if that legislation passed, although it makes it specific to, I think, the medical board and a couple other boards, and optometry didn't get included in it because the department installed that program and report on steps rest, it will be easier for the reporting to be done for the optometrists and opticians. So that's something that would be followed up with the executive officer, and I'll help her with that if need be.
And what's the timing approximately?
It will go into effect January 1st.
Item number 8, Ms. Michelin.
So I guess part of the, okay, so mobile clinics. So talking about these two big issues, the one issue with mobile clinic is I believe we have the language approved for in-home care, homebound care. So, and the work group has been appointed, correct? The work group? We did that at the last board meeting in order to go after and find an author for that piece of legislation. You know, I think we also need to have a plan of how we're going to move forward with the other portion of the mobile clinic. There has been some discussion. Dr. Kawaguchi was on the phone. I was there for part of the meeting in person pertaining to mobile clinics and schools. And basically, there's movement around, and you're going to have to pipe in because I can't remember all the details, but there's definitely some things going on pertaining to mobile clinic, which I think we all know, that's probably not compliant with state law in terms of some of the vision services being provided in school districts. You know, there's some, and it's my understanding that even if an optometrist goes to a school and volunteers their time, and correct me if I'm wrong, that, you know, that's not legal under the current statute. Is that correct? I'm looking at my optometrist buddies on the board. Can you go and volunteer your time and give vision screenings at a school? Is that considered a mobile clinic or not? Anyone?
I know there's a provision for temporary practice that would apply to. It's
a gray area.
I wouldn't say that, but without, you know, giving a full legal opinion here, I would say that if they're just going volunteering, it does fit into the current statute of it, as long as it's limited in scope and time. But you're raising an issue that needs to be looked at.
So I guess my point being is that, you know, we were able to come to a conclusion, come up with legislation on the homebound care. I do think that going forward, when that legislation is introduced, we're going to be opening up a can of worms that we have to be prepared for, because with the discussion that's going on around some of the mobile clinics that are being made available at school sites and within school districts, there's some discussions going on and conflicting opinions on how that should go forward. So I think that's something we have to consider. Part of the meeting pertained to legislation that I believe failed last session around expanding the scope for Vision to Learn. And there's, again, some opposition coming from the school nurses and the California Teachers Association regarding how Vision to Learn is providing comprehensive eye exams to children, particularly in low-income areas, which kind of affects our plight to get the children's visions bill move forward. I don't know if you have any comments from he was on the call.
Yeah, so we attended this meeting as part of the Children's Division Work Group, and the one thing I'll report back to the board that I found positive was I believe that all this legislation that we've is opportunity to children, to vision services as well as treatment. That seemed to be a consensus that was being discussed in this meeting. That most people in the room were agreeing that there's opportunity. And one person even stated, we agree there's opportunity because each of the key stakeholder groups is feeling like their solution is the only solution. And I think that still creates opportunity for us as a board to move forward, going forward with legislation that is encompassing children's decision, because I think that we are starting to change the tide of denials of opportunity to, yes, okay, we agree there's some opportunity, then let's figure out how to solve it together. So that was the encouragement that I felt from the meeting.
So I think that, so two takeaways. One is I think, clinic and children's vision, number one. Number two, we still have to resolve the issue of the mobile clinic, taking out the homebound care, because I do think we have to have some clear, it needs to be clearer in terms of the statute of what a mobile clinic is, how they practice, how do we kind of regulate that. Then we get into the children's vision. So here we go again, year 4, back to introducing legislation in January. We have tried every way possible. I think our bill last year with Assemblywoman Burke, we really thought we had been told that it's a fight for whatever reason, which I think the work group is asking, and I don't know if we have to, but we would like the board's support in going forward in introducing legislation again, and reverting back to the original legislation we did the first time. So that was AB or SB 402, I think, where it's a little bit stronger language, but provides, I think, wiggle room for us in order if we have to amend the bill to get ultimately what we're looking for, which is getting this form in the packet to raise awareness about comprehensive eye exams. And so we would like, just to cover our bases, I think, and I'm looking at you since it's a new session, that we have the backing of the board to move forward with this issue. I don't know if there's any questions or comments.
No, just a comment. I know the persistence, and I know what that experience is because it took 3 years for me to finally have a meeting with the college just to get the degree program. 3 years, you got to constantly just keep working on it. I'm just curious about the medical board. You asked about vision screening. Have you reached out to the medical board doctors and see how they go about doing that? Or are they also into what we're doing here? And is there any help from them as well?
So they're ophthalmologists, so they have a pocket license, so they can practice. Their license goes with them. I don't think that many ophthalmologists do vision screenings, if any. The challenge is that one of the groups that's opposed to the legislation, at least in the past, has been the California Medical Association. So, we could certainly try. I don't know that they're going to be helpful in moving this legislation forward, because one of the other folks that oppose it are the eye surgeons, which, fall under the medical board. Yes.
So you say scope fight, and I think you may have just answered my question, but let me be very specific. It's a scope fight, meaning two professions are fighting over the scope of the practice. What are the two professions?
Your guess is as good as mine. That has come from a representative of one of the major groups that's opposing the legislation. I don't know where she got that from. That's what I think part of it is a strategy to scare legislators into not supporting the legislation because they don't necessarily like the word scope fight. Again, all we are asking is to put a voluntary form in the packet, raising the awareness of the importance of a comprehensive eye exam. That's it.
Right. So the eye exam can be performed by an optometrist.
Yeah.
It can be performed by an ophthalmologist.
Yes.
It can be performed by an eye surgeon.
Yes. You're right.
Any one of those groups that.
What it comes down to, in my opinion, as most things do, it's money. And there are certain groups that don't want to pay for their folks to make sure their children have a comprehensive eye exam. And that's what it's about. And that one group yields a lot of power, and for whatever reason, this is the bill that they want to take us on to kill. So we're going to keep going, because I think what Dr. Kawaguchi said is true. Now suddenly all these groups are talking about it. That wasn't happening 4 years ago. We're still being invited to these meetings. I do think that one thing that needs to happen is that once this bill is introduced and it goes to committee, I still stand by the fact that we need to have as many board members at the Capitol as possible, you know, and having, you know, board members going in, tag teaming a public and a private and a licensed or a professional member and talking about the issue, because we, you know, it's a lot of work for just the two of us to do it ourselves. And it's going to take a lot of support from outside the board in order to make this happen. So I don't know if there's any other questions or comments.
Back to, you said that the work group had come up with something for home health care. So there is proposed legislation that look at shopping for an author.
Yeah, we approved that at the last board meeting.
But I mean, it's ready to go to shop.
Yeah, that's ready
okay.
to go. And I
Okay.
think it was Dr. Wong and someone else who's on that work group.
It's me and Mark, and originally it was me and Donna, and then
Yeah.
Donna left, so then Mark.
Yeah.
So it is,
So we have language that all interested stakeholders that were involved in approved, but we decided to just put it on hold until the 2019 legislative session, and also to see if there was any other additional. We were going to look into the rest of the whole entire mobile clinics issue, but we really haven't addressed that yet. But we just knew that looking at mobile clinics as a whole is a much bigger can of worms.
so this coming session is when you're looking at finding an author and.
Correct.
And
Just for the homebound.
Just for the
homebound, yeah.
Just for the homebound. The rest of the mobile clinics has to be
Cool.
addressed.
Great.
And then we'll see. I mean, once we introduce that legislation, who knows who'll come out of the woodwork. So I think the two major issues next session are this mobile clinic homebound, children's vision, and then if we want to try to tackle the other part of mobile clinic, we can. I don't know if we want to. It may come to us anyway. There might be other legislation that's not sponsored by us. And maybe that's what we wait and see what happens.
Yeah.
Right, so to clarify, the meeting that we were invited to that we attended was, in our opinion, a spinoff of AB 2904, which we didn't sponsor. And it was related to some things that Vision to Learn was looking to clarify. So again, there's definitely things going on, and we'll just try to keep you apprised of things.
So I don't know if there's any, so I guess I'm asking for a motion to direct.
Executive officer.
Well, I think we're gonna have to have the work group meet, you know, we have some folks that we wanna meet with to get support. But then I think it's the language that we wanna introduce, which would be the language that we originally started with, which was SB 402, I believe. And that was, I don't know how many years ago, 3 years ago. But just to give us that capability to introduce the legislation, but then also the ability to approve amendments, knowing that the ultimate goal is to get this form into the packet.
So you're looking for a motion to give you some leeway, if you will. Is there a second?
So just to clarify, maybe is your motion to have the board continue to formally support Children's Vision Bill as formally written in SB 402, or continue to move those discussions, group to continue to move forward with that legislation and discussions and report back to the board?
That sounds good to me. Okay with the work group?
Yeah.
And I'm wondering if prior votes on this are still open and active.
Yeah.
That, to continue allowing.
Came before, we had a version of the bill.
Okay.
2440, whatever. And now we're asking to actually go back to the language that we started at, which is a little bit, it's stronger. It's definitely stronger. You know, that was the one that ended up with the start there, stronger and be able to see what we have to get it through.
I think the intent of my motion is to agree with that strategy, but not necessarily cement us in with that. Cement us in with that language, but to agree with the
That's our starting
strategy.
point. That's the starting language
Right.
that we.
Okay, so we had the motion second.
Did you
and
have a
discussion.
second?
Yes.
Okay.
Didn't you second it?
Nope.
I didn't. I knew I heard it over here.
We sound so much alike.
I heard a second coming from my right. So Ms. Garcia seconded. Now, a board discussion, please.
Dr. Trey.
Aye.
Ms. Michelin, aye. Dr. Shaw is absent. Ms. Garcia. Dr. Calgucci.
Aye.
Dr. McIntyre. Mr. Moradami.
Aye.
Ms. Salzar Sperber.
Abstain.
Dr. Wong. Ms. Brandvine.
Aye.
Motion carries. The next meeting, and see if any legislation from other groups is introduced regarding that issue.
Okay. Thank you. So that takes us to agenda item number 10. Since we covered 9, it was moved up. Future agenda items. What I heard was the report from DCA on the salary study outcome. Let's get that on the agenda so that we're not agendaing it in February for months later. I'd like to hear about that one as soon as possible. And I believe I heard mobile clinics will have a watch, so any update that we may have in Children's Vision, go ahead, either Ledge Reg, work group, whichever pertains. Anything else board members right now would like to add to future agenda items? And if not, please get them in to Shara, as we tend to work on the agenda the week after this meeting, so that it's all fresh in our mind. And then we revisit it a month before the meeting, before posting it 2 weeks. So you'll be hearing from me next week. Okay. Anything else on future agenda items from the public like us to include consideration? We're looking at adjournment. Thank you.
I know. Who did? You?
You
I
told me
did.